Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. My guest on the podcast today is Josh Burchick. Josh is a captain with Howard County Department of Fire and Rescue Services and has served there since 2004. He's also the creator of Forged and Unbroken. You can find them as a podcast and a social media platform. He's written a whole bunch of articles on leadership tolerance and leadership capital. Additionally, he has served as a Kentland Volunteer Fire Department in Prince George's County, MD. He is a trainer for the IAFFS Fireground Survival Program, is an ACE certified peer fitness trainer and nationally accredited CrossFit trainer. He holds a bachelor's degree in public safety leadership from Johns Hopkins University. And he also runs the online community of Forged and Unbroken, a service promoting resiliency in the fire service through physical, mental, and emotional means, donating to public safety, nonprofits, and charitable causes. We cover a whole host of things in today's episode, and most notably, and the way I found Josh first and foremost was when I came across this podcast when he was sitting down with Battalion Chief John Bean, an absolute wealth of knowledge. He's a Battalion 2 and Command of Side Charlie the night of the July 23rd, 2018 line of duty death of Lieutenant Nathan Flynn. It was a bloody emotional episode, that was. You can find that over on Spotify, Forged and Unbroken by Joshua Burchick. It was episode 15. That's where I first heard Josh's story. And I was driven to reach out to him, and we had a fantastic conversation. I know there's going to be a lot to take away from today's episode. Kind of a debrief. But a debrief, I've researched it, looked at it, read the articles, but a debrief I don't know very little about, that's come to us from the States. And Josh was there. And he's a very talented guy, very articulate individual, and the way he puts this across and the lessons learned, and we do a bit of back and forth about comparisons from UK to America, and there's loads of great stuff in here. So it's a real privilege to have Josh on, and a real privilege to be able to bring this to you. So be sure to check the notes underneath this. You'll find a link to Josh's podcast as well and their online platforms of Forged and Unbroken. There's a whole bunch more great stuff over there, and I know you'll take a lot of value from it. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Josh Burchick. I'll see you on the other side.
The Forged and Unbroken stuff, it all started, I think, kind of in that little buzz of wanting to do something maybe during the pandemic is when things started sinking in, when I was involved in a couple of gnarly incidents, and people or crews would come to me and my crews and be like, hey, how do we overcome these situations? Or how do we better identify processes to help us out for training and fitness and all kinds of things? And my answer was always, well, it depends. And people, not that they were getting frustrated, I was like, this is a wide net. Everything that we do, there's so much involved. It is the occupational training. It is fitness. There's individual and team leadership. There's all kinds of things. And so much of it now with the studying and reading that I do is wrapped up in the mental and human performance side of things. So to sit there and give you like one quick answer became long drawn out conversations, right? And so I thought, well, let's start breaking this down into bite-sized chunks and just start getting information out there. And so that was kind of some of the impetus for Forged and Unbroken Fire. And I wanted to make it a wide paintbrush stroke. So it is the training, it is fitness, it is a lot of the mental performance. As I've gotten older, I'm also a dad, 2 daughters, married, and you start looking at all these different relationships and you start realizing there's a ton of psychology and sociology with maintaining efficiency, right? And so I started nerding out on that. And when I started implementing that into teams and we talked about it, like we were actually getting a dozen grown men and women at night before we're going to bed for our shift, hoping that we, get to sleep. We'd break out books and do like a mini book club and talk about, all right, well, how does this translate now to the fire service? And we were becoming stronger. There was more trust. There was more cohesion. And like I said, I just started throwing bite-sized chunks of this out on the Forged and Unbroken platform. And with that specifically, I do like a mini weekly podcast with that. There's the public podcast. There's daily workouts. And this profession has given me so much. So any little bit of revenue that thing brings in, a third of it automatically goes right back out to public safety charities and causes. There's also give back for members. And also just started like another project called In Extremis Readiness. And I keep piling more stuff on, man. Yeah. So that literally just dropped, I think, last week. That'll be like another podcast arm, and there'll be some more longer format writing. Again, just bite-sized chunks of the mental performance and the physical performance of what we're going through, what our minds and bodies are going through when we're in these really dangerous environments. So that's been a lot of the goal, and just putting information out there. It's been amazing because I get to meet people like you and go around the country and do stuff, man. So it's been a really crazy opportunity as well.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Gore-Tex Professional Fabrics. Now, we all know the working environment of a firefighter is filled with challenges. We face serious risks on the job, such as heat exhaustion, burns, physical and mental stress, and we frequently come into contact with high levels of toxic chemicals. Now, I have been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents, and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together. I've got a really terrible habit, which is even worse on podcasts, of interrupting people. So I'm literally, I have a notebook. No, I have a notebook now, and it's kind of a trick hack because it allows you the ability to circle back whilst remaining present, because it's that difficulty. And you'll have it with your children. It's like being present in the moment and listening to understand rather than listening to respond. But there's so many things that we've covered in that first sentence there that I just want to like circle back on. So Forged and Unbroken lives entirely independent of your. Obviously, there's loads. The whole thing is relatable and carryover and bleed over, but like it sits totally independent from the work you currently. Because people won't know you're a serving captain still with the department in the US. Yeah. But this is your because that's. I always think the saddest thing about the kind of things that we do and Top Floor Tactics and other people that are out there running similar elements is. It's almost a shame that it has to live independent, but that's what's so crucially important about it, because it has to have that freedom of not being, I always say, like, strong views weakly held. You can't be married to certain opinions or tactics or beliefs just because of an organizational structure or anything like that. I always think of it like science. Like, science progresses one funeral at a time. And I think the Fire and Rescue Service progresses through retirement, not through one death, hopefully. Well, it does also progress through deaths,
I would agree with that, sure.
But like, people get so heavily invested in an idea or a theory or a firefighting tactic or whatever it might be, that's the limitation to its own progression. And then you have the odd maverick, such as yourself, who kind of jumps off the highway and is still traveling in the same direction, but they're dipping in and out through the undergrowth and picking up all of these golden nuggets and trying to bring them back into the thing that they do. You said a couple of elements there that I wanted to kind of expand on is we speak about the fundamentals, and you spoke about how it's hard to deal with these things in isolation. So in the UK, as an example, we, in a lot of our services, when they join, we have like firefighter development program, or some places might call it firefighter foundations, or they might call it core skills in their service. And when I came into the training department that I work in now, I really struggled with that definition of core skills. Yeah. So for core skills, and a lot of elements that they cover in the UK Fire and Rescue Service will be things like running hose, pumping, pitching ladders, all of the basics, PPE appreciation, how to wear your bunker gear and all that sort of jazz. But the idea of it is that it's the core skills of a firefighter. So not until they've mastered that do they move on to breathing apparatus. But breathing apparatus is a core skill of a firefighter. And so is driving, and so is a number of other elements for the UK. And I know for the US, not all of you drive, do you? It's not a mandatory requirement that everybody has to drive, or is it?
No, I think it's very department specific. It is, at least for us, you have the choice of either promoting to that position or becoming like a backup driver where you can train.
So do you get a pay rise to drive?
For a lot of departments, it is considered a promotion, yeah. And a pay raise with that, yeah.
That is a really interesting point. So we don't pay our drivers anymore.
Oh, interesting.
And I think that's one of the reasons that so let me correct myself from what I said a minute ago. So it's not mandatory that you have to drive on blue lights. Okay. So your EFAD, your emergency fire appliance driving qualification, is for you to drive on blue lights response driving.
Okay.
But you have to do a HGV or an LGV, so a heavy goods vehicle or long goods vehicle qualification, to be able to move the rig. Mm-hmm. If you need to move it on the instant ground or in the training department around the station, whatever. But it is a separate qualification, which I think they missed a trick there, because what you end up doing is a lot of people get their license to drive heavy goods vehicles, and they also use it off the job, which is great and fine.
Yeah.
But a lot of them are choosing not to advance onto their blue light response, because you end up risking your own license as well.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people perhaps don't realize. It should seem obvious, but you guys get a pay rise for it. I think that's the game. I think that's the way to go, because it is a skill set. It's not a skill set everyone can do. It's not a skill set everyone would naturally lend themselves to. But we don't currently pay our drivers anymore. And I think that's going to need to change if we expect people to step into these roles, because we're going through a lot of retirement now.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's looking like your neck of the woods, but
tons.
We have a lot of people, which is, again, probably one of the origins of Forged and Unbroken. It certainly was for the Firefighters podcast, because we wanted to capture them in audible time capsules to be able to pay it forward. Because, like you were saying, the beauty of meeting so many educated people, and as your sort of awareness expands, I always think, like, the more knowledge I get, the more interesting people I speak to, the more that kind of sphere of awareness grows. On the other side of it, my awareness of how acutely ignorant I am, or was before, because if you've only ever worked in one department, you've only ever worked in one service, I feel like you've only ever read one page of a massive book, which is the various tactics, strategies, fitness, well-being, mental health, the way that we go about the role of fire and rescue is very, very different. But amongst all of that, sorry, there is a question in it, like core skills, firefighter foundations. Like when you're speaking to these crews, that's what I'm saying about it's so hard to deal with these things in isolation, because if you're teaching pumping as an example, well, it's all dependent on so many other elements, isn't it? But if you only had 2 weeks, so you've got a fire crew that's sent to you and they're saying, Josh, this crew's from the arse end of nowhere, they're a shower of shit, they're really fucking struggling with just the basics, but no one gives you a bigger brief than that. They're just struggling with the basics, brother. What, for you to feel safe, for you to say, look, we're going to send them out in 2 weeks, we need them to go because whatever, everyone's gone to war and these are the people we've got to look after your community where your family live. What would you spend those 2 weeks doing? What do you think are the things that we're really struggling to nail?
Ooh, man, that's a good one.
It's a tough one off the bat.
Yeah, you're coming out the gate hot. I always start with, I don't want to say the end in mind, because I'm not. I don't want to be an outcome focused person. I'm very much. I'm trying to be a process driven person, because it helps pick apart things better in my mind. But for me and the teams that I work in, we set expectations right up front. This is what is going to be expected of you. This is what success looks like. And now we're going to go through the motions of getting us there. And for a lot of the teams I've worked on, when I come into a shift, there could be people that have 20 years on, there could be people that have 10 years on, and then the person that's got 6 months. And depending on what kind of time and experience they have put into these years of service, they could be highly functioning, or the 20-year person could have just repeated that first year 20 times.
I always say, have you had 20 years of experience, have you got 1 year of experience 20 times?
Exactly.
Because again, you could be from a station that never has any running calls, and you've just not had that. People say, I've got a lot of experience, and I'm not saying I've got more or less than them, but you can have that. John, you ever heard of John McDonough?
The name sounds familiar, I'm not sure.
Yeah, he's a fire behaviour expert from Australia. We had him on the podcast ages ago, and he just came over to the UK to lead on some firefighting practices. We're doing a lot of fire behaviour training and instructing with him. And he was saying, when you glance round at the back of the truck, you tipped out to a call, you jump on, and 3 more jump on in the back. The assumptions you make, because in their service they get different stripes every 5 years they get a stripe. And that has a suggestive assumption
Yes.
that they are a competent crew. But like when you're driving and you're arriving, you're reading the fire externally, whatever it is, what do you think they're going to do when they go through that door? Because you've made assumptions about their capabilities and you'll be basing your tactical plan on those assumptions. What do you, because this is the thing about BA and why I think breathing apparatus or SCBA for different people's terminology is such a unique thing, because everything else I can see what you're doing.
Yeah.
Externally, I can see everything that you're doing and we can debrief it and talk about it and help me understand your thought process and your logic path when you went through what you were doing versus what I saw you doing. But with breathing apparatus, when you go through that door, I don't know what the fuck you're doing. I have no idea what you're doing. I have an idea of what I think you're going to do, and I've given you a rough brief.
Yeah.
And we can talk about briefings in a minute because they're quite structured in the UK, for better or worse. We put a lot of barriers in place, I think. But those assumptions, and this is my ADHD brain, sorry, I'm fucking taking us off on another rabbit hole.
Oh, I love it.
But like what you think people are going to do when you go through there cycles us back, and I will come back to yourself around what you expect of that firefighter as their foundational principles.
Yeah. And that's why I think it's so early to communicate that early on. And so we'll sit there and I don't care how frustrated the senior guy or girl might be on the shift for how basic we're starting. We'll start with the basics because I want to make it brutally clear that everyone understands exactly where we need to begin and how we're going to progress through that. And I'm a big fan of crawl, walk, run, stress inoculation based training. So it can be mind-numbingly simple to start out with, because that way everybody understands that expectation, that fundamental skill. And then if we were to change roles and responsibilities and riding assignments for the day, any person can get dropped in those and they're able to function. And then over the course of those next 2 weeks, I'm ratcheting up stress and I'm ratcheting up stress. And I'm bringing in higher skills. And we don't move on until you're at a place where you really can't get it wrong. I think that happens too often. Somebody finally gets it right for the first time, whatever that skill is. I'm also a big fan of doing catastrophizing SCBA type stuff. And so with SCBA, we'll get to the point of I'll pull a line of duty and near misses, and I'll find out, all right, what happened to this person and how do we overcome this situation? And then we start picking it apart. And we get to the point to where we look back over the course of 2 weeks and we've basically implemented a confidence course where we started super small, and at the end of hours and hours and hours of training, we are now at this top tier, like disaster type scenario. But because we've ratcheted up the stress just over time, people don't realize how far they've actually come, but we're all experiencing that stress together. And there's a quote that's, you want to know how to build morale as you do hard things. So as a team, for the mental performance of doing those hard things together, you can reach flow states better. You're learning, going back to the human performance, of how to operate under stress. That happens too often, and it drives me nuts where we're in controlled environments in the firehouse and, bluebird sky days and everything's fine and we're going through these skills, but we need to get to the point where our breathing rate is up, our heart rate is up, our vision is taken away. There's loud noises all around us because that's what's going to simulate the fire ground. And then we're going to get to that point to where I want to see what your breaking point is almost. Now, my goal is not to mess with anybody, not to throw disastrous curveballs, but I want to get to the point where we're stressed out and you still see success on the back end of that. And I think failure is a great teacher. I'm good with failure.
Failing safely. Creating simulation. Because people that have never failed, I'd be nervous of anyone that's not had a personal catastrophe and had to, fumble their way through it in some capacity, whether that's a personal one, a professional one. Mm-hmm. You're going to fail at some point. Yes. We all do. I've failed God knows how many times.
Every day.
But you learn, oh mate, my life has been a bin fire of various capacities, personally and professionally. Yeah. But you learn a lot of stuff as you're getting through that. They say adversity introduces a man to himself, because there's assumed aspects of how you believe you're going to deal with something. And that can be very difficult when, like you say, you get stuck in that training mode.
Yes.
And there's that almost it's a sort of malaise, that over familiarity, that kind of just very relaxed, overly comfortable approach to training. But we struggle a lot in the UK, from my experiences traveling across different departments, different services, of balancing this element of command and control, realistic training, stress inoculation, and what I would say is an aversion to a perceived militant approach.
Okay.
Yeah. It sounds like I'm tiptoeing my way around my words there, but basically,
a little bit.
There's people not wanting to look like everyone's being bullied and harassment.
Yeah.
Pete's a big 6'5", 18 stone male, whatever. Is he just massaging his ego?
Sure.
Getting people to run around and getting them stressed and getting them worked up and putting too much pressure on them, and then shouting and changing the plan and all this sort of stuff. Yeah. And there's an element of appropriateness in terms of what level they're at in their initial acquisition of skills. But if you're doing revalidations, reaccreditations, recertifications of times, then you should have competent firefighters back who have built up a level of resiliency and calloused the mind a little bit towards a requirement for quite an intensive command and control system. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, they should have a tolerance to that. But at what point do you start introducing that? Because otherwise you're setting recruits up to fail, or they're arriving on stations and their captains, their sub-officers, their watch managers, whatever it might be, are going, what the fuck is this? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And that's probably what I don't know if you ever find that working in the training department. Like, it's hard. You know, everyone says everyone could be a firefighter. No. I don't think that's true. And I'm not saying we're special.
Yeah, right.
I couldn't be a brain surgeon.
Right, for sure.
You know, I'm fucking optimistic. I'm really interested. But don't give me the fucking scalpel, Josh. This episode is brought to you in partnership with MSA Safety. Today we have them to thank for the improved firefighter safety through connectivity in their brand new connected firefighter system. At the center of the connected firefighter platform is the MSA M1 SCBA with telemetry. That integrates straight in with the Luna system, which is a wireless all-in-one device creating an independent search and rescue network, providing edge detection, enhanced personal thermal imaging, while simplifying post-scene reporting and data retention. All of this then plugs into the FireGrid system for cloud-based connectivity, real-time information, and data-driven decisions for the incident commander. MSA are truly taking massive strides in the future of improved firefighter safety through connectivity in the brand new MSA Connected Firefighter platform. Now back to the show.
Yeah, I think there's absolutely a level of bandwidth that the human has for whatever it is that they can tolerate. And I don't mean to beat around the bush too much, but we absolutely have people that we have let go. And I think it's about having a very honest conversation with them, saying, this is where you're at. This is what we expected with you. These are all the things that we have done for you, where 90% of the other people have succeeded and you're still not. And going back to the militant piece that you've talked about, maybe it's a buzzword over here, but talking about psychological safety within a team, I'm okay with being paramilitary. I'm not okay with having to monitor what it is that you're saying when you're trying to evaluate teams and processes. And I think too often that when you're trying to give feedback, you're analyzing stuff, especially going maybe up the chain of command, I think the red flag for us is if you have to change or doctor what it is that you're trying to say because there's conflict aversion, then that's not a psychologically safe team that you're operating in, and you're never going to be able to excel. So to root that out and to have a atmosphere and environment and a team that can have those really frank conversations is absolutely paramount. It's a necessity for what we do.
I think of it a bit like my dogs. So I've got 3 dogs. Okay. One of them's a German Shepherd, and so he's a big boy. He's 50-something kilos, full of testosterone. He's only 2 years of age, and I want him to do certain things. But also, he's there because he's guard dog. You know, when I'm on shift and stuff, he's walks around the house in the evening. He doesn't live in his crate just during the day sometimes. But anyway, the point I'm making is he has a purpose, and that's what we got him for. And you ever heard the analogy that it's better to have a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war?
Yes, love it.
Yeah, I love it because we're hiring firefighters. Now, someone that wants to be a firefighter for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, our retirement age is about 60 in the UK. What's your retirement age out there?
There really isn't one. A lot of people just put in years of service. So a 20,
yeah, well,
it's
about 30, 35, 30 years.
Yeah,
but
typical.
You can just keep going here.
Yeah.
You can just keep going all the way to 60 if you want to. And with people joining in their mid-30s, 40s, it's entirely likely that because a lot of people are transitioning out of a career they didn't like, realizing they're a bit of a neurodiverse, kinesthetic thinker, and they want to do something more practical that they see a bit more fulfillment in. So maybe they join the fire service.
Yeah.
The people we attract and the people that we market to may not always be the most well-educated. I'm not saying they're morons, with respect and all that jazz.
Right.
But I'm not saying they're morons, but they're not rocket scientists either. Yeah, like they may not be the most articulate. I was speaking to we had a guest on, Carl Boseman, who's a retired deputy chief fire officer in the UK, and he says, when you sat around the watch table, when you sat there listening to people in the bays or whatever it might be, you're a senior officer coming to visit a station. Take it how it's given. You know what I mean? Let them use the language that they need to use. Because the limits of your language are the limits of your world. And I learned this more and more with the podcast I know about yourself. But it's hard if you've not spent time doing it to find 7 ways to say something.
Yes.
And then thinking about which is most appropriate for somebody else. And for someone that wants to run into a burning building, rip open cars, jump into water, not get paid a massive amount for it, you're not going to attract a lot of doctorates from that sort of thing. And those that you do attract tend to just want to rise through the ranks and get into the more strategic, analytical senior, which is also great. And we need those people to do that. And that's fantastic. But coming back to your point, you need to be able to give them that space, give them that verbal space in their, whatever works in their vernacular, whatever works for their vocabulary, to be able to tell you what they're feeling and not allow yourself to get too hurt. I mean, if they're being maliciously rude, okay, we're in a different place here. But that's that's rarely the case. Yeah. It's just poorly articulated passion. Is probably the best way I would say it. And people struggle with that when it's not packaged in a manner in which they want. And then all you end up doing is suppressing that passion. And maybe you suppress an opinion. Maybe you suppress, let's say Josh is, he's a really experienced, he's 20-year captain, but he'll only ever be a captain because he's just not, that's what he loves, or maybe he's not got the capacity to go further than that. He's going to communicate in that manner all the time, but he's probably got more experience and more experiential learning than most of the senior leaders in that department. I'm not saying that is or isn't the case for yourself, but it's like, you've got to be able to take it how it's given and with the intention that it's given, haven't you?
Yeah, and my wife and I talk about this a lot because she's in a executive role in scientific research and publications and stuff. She does a lot of work in the UK as well. But we talk about just assume positive intent. No matter what is going on, the human nature isn't set up. Yes, there are pessimistic people, and sometimes I also need to catch myself. But if you frame every conversation that conflict doesn't necessarily mean malice, and if you assume positive intent, then you remove all the other distracting noise and barriers to having conversations, so that way you can get to a better place together as a team. And that's only going to create more trust and more openness. They will follow the leader, hopefully more. I will understand where they're coming from. And just like you said, the way I articulate things may not be the way that they learn. And I've learned this as a fitness trainer as well. Sometimes it's the kinesthetic awareness. Sometimes it's visual cues. Sometimes it's the auditory cues. Sometimes I have to physically hey, is it okay to touch you? You're doing this thing. I need you to do this other thing. And then once you start realizing that you're speaking the same language, but there's totally different processes and mapping that's happening, all up in your head, we can get to a better place. But we are really great in the fire service of just trying to pigeonhole one side of things. And do you guys use blue collar, white collar terms in the UK?
We do. Yeah, we understand the blue collar, white collar. So fire and rescue is still termed as a blue collar job. Yeah,
exactly. And there's definitely a cultural movement to make the fire service and keep it blue collar. And I don't really have a like a flag to plant on either side of it. I think there's benefits to both sides of it, but we also have to understand that it's still a very dirty job. And like you said, we're also getting people from all over the place, from all different backgrounds. We're not getting 4th generation firefighters anymore, especially because, or at least over here, it's an employee market post-COVID where we don't have people that are coming like you. There's great work from home scenarios and high paying jobs. We used to get 4,000 applicants in 1 hour. It would shut down our systems. We'd have lines out the doors for 30 jobs. And now we're struggling to get 800. And then every step of our interview process keeps getting dwindled down. And we're fighting to get 30 people now. So it's
Maybe we're the same.
Yeah, really interesting.
I sent a team off to the to a college where we send them sometimes for some foundational work for 12 weeks to a fire service college. Different services do it differently in the UK. Okay. We still do a little bit of that. And one of them dropped out. Unfortunately, they had an issue with their personal health and well-being. And they were like, that's not a problem. We'd already paid for the course. And they just said, we'll just pull someone from the reserve list. And I'm like, we haven't got a fucking reserve list. That is it. Like before, you used to have standbys, didn't you? Yeah. It's like, just drop them in. Yeah. We didn't have anyone.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So we lost the money.
Wow.
We lost the money. I think it was like, this was cheeky because then I started reading the contract. So not only we paid something like £8,000 for the place, but if you lose the place, you have to pay £6,000 more for not sending someone.
Wow.
Someone didn't read that.
Yeah.
Because okay, if you don't get your money back, fair enough, we've lost £8,000, But I have to, you're going to redistribute that place anyway.
Yes.
And for the instructor, it doesn't make a difference if you've got 15 or 14. Okay, you might have to make an adjustment for your scheme of work, but it's like, It's not going to make any difference. You're still going to need as many instructors for the thing. Even if you needed one less, you'd be safe. But anyway, I'm getting into a rabbit hole, but I was like, cheeky bleeders. Wow. But yeah, we haven't got the reserve list. Before, you'd have people waiting primed, bags packed for the first week while that team's at the college because they'd be like, I might get the call. Someone might not make the cut for the first week. Not happening now. But I also think, and I wanted to ask you, like, the element of the podcast that we run, I don't think we advertise very well. I think you guys and girls do advertise better than us. Mm-hmm. With the greatest of respect, off the back of some massive tragedies. I know we've had Grenfell and other elements in the UK, but obviously with 9/11, do you felt, because you were serving during the time, has everyone forgotten about it? Did it bring positive attention to the fire department? Has that continued to perpetuate? Because, when you had the Iraq War, there was a surge across all of Europe and America. I think a lot of people joined. They wanted to be Marines, Special Forces, whatever they wanted to be. Did you see anything similar? Is it still held with high regard? Like, we're not allowed to wear our uniforms outside of work in a lot of places, and like you guys and girls seem to have a lot more pride in T-shirts, badges on cars, all this sort of stuff. We don't seem to have the same. Yeah. I mean, Americans are quite a lot more patriotic than we are. There's this weird, like, stiff upper lip UK self-deprecating thing that I hate.
Yeah.
And I don't. Pride's a funny thing, isn't it? We have these silly sayings like "pride comes before a fall" and "pride is the ego," and I'm like, no, we should be proud. We should be proud of what we do. We should be proud of ourselves. Are you proud of yourself? You should be.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's self-confidence.
For sure.
It's a healthy relationship with your own reputation that you have of yourself.
Yeah.
Are you who you say you are? That to me is pride, authenticity, self-confidence. It's the thing I try and teach my kids. I have a young daughter. She's 11. And the biggest thing I want to give her is pride and self-confidence, because I think that's something we're losing.
I completely agree. And me having two daughters at the same age, they're about to be 11 and 8, to mold them to be confident, kind human beings for this world is like our main driving responsibility now. So I can completely appreciate that. As far as 9/11, to be clear, I was actually still in high school.
How long ago it is, isn't it? You joined 2004, didn't you? Yeah.
2004, I was still in high school as a volunteer. And then I was actually sitting in Spanish class when the principals came over the intercoms and told us what was going on. And we flipped on the TV and watched a second plane hit. That did spur a ton of service-oriented thought process and volunteerisms and jobs and all that. Obviously, the massive drive of support. I remember when, after volunteering and actually getting a paid job, going through the academy, I'm now a paid firefighter. There was a period where I think our community, our country got a little worn out, and then the war started, and there's always backlash in politics and war. There was a small period, and very rarely do we get some opportunities where a couple of my friends actually wouldn't tell people that they were in the fire service, because they'd be like, "Oh, I guess you want me to buy you a drink now," or "I guess, I should be, thanking you for your service." I was like, "You asked me what I did. I don't need a free drink.
Fuck
I'm good."
you.
Yeah, it was kind of shitty for a little bit, but that was pretty rare. It didn't happen a whole lot. Generally, especially here in the States, I'm not sure how it is on your side. The police are the ones that are getting the raft of shit right now, and have been for years. And by and large, the fire service is still seen in a positive light. We did have a couple issues here and there when we were having some riots on our side. I'm right next door to Baltimore City, which is where a lot of them happen. But it was pretty centralized. It was localized. It was not as grand as the news made it seem. So on occasion, we do kind of get wrapped up in with police, and a lot of times their uniforms are very similar to police. Actually, during the riots, they told us we couldn't wear our uniforms because we were being mistaken for police officers. But again, that's rare. That's not even a policy anymore. And generally speaking, we're seen in a positive light. And I also make sure to tell our people that we have to make sure that we maintain and earn that trust with the community, because we are brought into the most vulnerable of positions. It's 3 a.m. and somebody's wife is laying on the bathroom floor naked and they need help, and they call us and bring us right in without asking any questions. Yeah. I can't tell you how many kids have been thrust into my arms without even knowing my name. Right. I don't know their name. I don't even know what's happening to them. A lifeless kid just gets dropped into your arms. And that amount of trust, I couldn't imagine doing that, So
no, we're standing on the shoulders of giants and stuff like that, aren't we? I would say you're a representation of something globally, way more than yourself. Like Josh, the brand new recruit, I always say, you will be the story someone will tell. Like, most people never have to call the fire department, so they might call them once or twice in their life, maybe never at all. Yeah. Maybe they'll see you go to the neighbor's house or something like that, and they'll tell that story. They'll go, "Yeah, we rang the fire department one, and who was that guy? Fucking Josh." Josh turned up, and he was with his crew, and they did this and they did that, and they saved the day. And you will be that story of their one experience with the fire department. Yeah. And you are then a physical manifestation of every firefighter globally, really. So it sounds like a heavy bag to carry, but that burden of responsibility, just think about it a little bit. When you are passing remarks on the truck and the windows are down and you're at a stoplight, just have a little think about the intention you perceive you're having, or the impact you perceive you're having, versus what's being received. Yeah, you know what I mean? How are you looking? And you try not make it performative. And again, we're not trying to suppress that creativity and that camaraderie and that dark humor that we need, but it's understanding what you stand for as well, isn't it?
I love that sentiment. It's so true. And I love the word you said. It's not performative. I can't stand that personally when you really upplay that. But we are in super vulnerable environments, so we have to conduct ourselves accordingly. And we have policies where we have a code of conduct, and what we do off duty also applies. So if we mess up, if we are drunk driving, or we get in a bar fight, or whatever happens, the first thing they say is an off-duty firefighter, and they insert your name. We're not just seen as the citizen off the side of the street. We are held to a higher standard. So right, wrong, or indifferent, there's an expectation that's placed on us by the community, and I think it needs to be a high expectation, and we need to be able to answer and uphold that standard. I don't think it's anything lofty. I think it's reasonable.
But that cycles us back to your understanding, our understanding of what we love to think of the crews that are responding to calls right now, what our perception of how they'd be conducting themselves, their proficiency. That's my big fear in the UK is as we dial back this urgency, the standard.
Yeah.
You know, I always say in the training departments, you're just protecting the standard. That it's not about you or the person. It's just, well, Josh, that's the line. We can be nice about it and all this sort of stuff, but if you're not going to reach it, maybe I need to change my approach and all this sort of stuff to try and to give you every opportunity to get as close to and progress past that line as possible. But we're not going to move the line. The team here at the podcast are extremely excited to announce our brand new partnership with Patrol Store UK. Patrol Store has been serving the UK's police, fire and emergency communities and first responder sector since 2008, providing leading brands such as Hikes, Magnum, 511, Nebo, OpZulu, Highlander, AKU and many, many more of our favourites. They are now also supplying bespoke uniform, PPE and station workwear to fire services around the UK. So for all our listeners that are part of your USAR, your HEART team, your ISAR team, your armed response teams, your fire investigation, your NALO, your hazmat and all of the training departments that have got your own budgets, be sure to get the absolute best for your team at a realistic price by contacting Aaron and the team at Patrol Store and referencing the Firefighters podcast. Patrol Store will also be taking part in our listener competition giveaways as well as providing unique discounts to podcast listeners. So for people that are always asking about Hikes boots as an example, that is one unique discount code that is coming to you very soon through Patrol Store. We've also got some incredible bags. I mean, the OpZulu bags are a game changer. So you know the really Gucci and expensive tactical black bags that everyone's using in CrossFit workouts and taking to the gym and taking to stations? Well, they've basically got that, but it's made better and costs less, because they're not slapping some Gucci expensive brand name on it and it's giving you what you want on a first responder salary. Be sure to keep your eyes in the notes of the episodes for links to unique offers and discount codes. And if you're looking to buy well and buy once, be sure to get in the notes and head over to Patrol Store UK. Now back to the show. I see people moving the line, and I see it in evaluations where you'll be sat with a group of instructors and people going, oh, well, you know, I mean, he did do a bit of this. And my easy thing is, like, certainly when it comes to SCBA, is, would you wear with him? And they're like, well, I mean, I could wear with him because, like, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing. But I'm not, no. So say he's just passed. He's just passed his accreditation. He's now safe to wear SCBA as a number 2, as we would call them over here.
Okay.
If he's wearing as a number 2 and the number 1 only qualified a month ago, give me that scenario. You've got to bring it down to the worst case scenario, because if they both only just reached the standard, almost good enough and almost good enough equals shit. Equals dangerous.
It does,
doesn't it?
It does.
And that's we don't rise to the level of our expectations. We fall to the level of our training, don't we? And that's what you need to have in your mind. It's the worst case scenario at 3 a.m. Are they going to be safe? Or are we going to be reading about them in 6 months' time and going, oh, yeah, oh, you know, you stood there in a health and safety inquiry and they go, well, Josh, you signed off this person's SCBA accreditation. Just, you made some remarks on the form. I'd just like to take you through them if we could, please. Before we do, could you just give me a recollection of how you felt they performed? And you'll go, well, I mean, it wasn't great, was it? Sorry, let me stop you there. You've written competent at the bottom of this assessment form I've got in front of me here. Do you know what I'm trying to get at?
Oh my God, yeah.
It's like, fucking hell.
I actually kind of dealt with that yesterday a little bit. So in my position, I'm considered a float captain. So I backfill any position where another officer takes off. So one day I'm on a ladder truck, another day I'm on an engine. Yesterday, for example, I was the countywide safety officer. So I'm in a pickup truck and I'm just driving. I go to all the major incidents, which is kind of cool.
That's a great job.
Yeah, it's a fun job. It's a fun job, but I have to deal with all the injuries. And so going back to what you said there, you have the young guys who are just passing, and then we also might have a 15-year guy. Going back to what we talked about before, there's a difference between experience and expertise. So they might have the experience, the years on the job, but they haven't maintained and accumulated the expertise that's required. So now you might have a 20-year guy and the person that just passed, you put them together and you still have that same low common denominator. And something that we say actually in our gym outside the fire service where I coach is the standard is the standard. Stop watering down the standard. And when you get upset that we're trying to hold you to a standard, the standard is there for a reason. So let's stop watering it down. We're going to work through this together. We're going to work through it collectively. It is not to bash you or embarrass you. A lot of times I try to remove any semblance of punishment. So many people fear punishment because they don't understand what it is they need to do. They fear it. So let's just take that out of the conversation, and we're going to build you up. So another retired captain that I sat and talked with, he suffered some major burns, but he came back and spent 40 years of a very successful career. And I remember his officer told him, he's like, read the job description for your position right now. If you do everything perfectly in your job description, you're considered average. And I want this to be very clear. We'll check all the boxes, that's fine. But if you want to excel in this job and you want to be respected, and you know the fire service is ruthless when it comes to reputations and how we build them down or can destroy them, you have to be able to push.
Was that Captain Bob Wiseman?
That was the Bob Wiseman one, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great episode. So,
thank you.
I've said it in the thing, but episode 18, we'll reference that in there for people who go listen to that one. It's great.
Yeah, and that really resonated with me because the standard is the standard, and oftentimes the standard is what is considered to be average. And so often now we're watering down. And going back to what happened yesterday, we're doing, we call them acquired structures. We will get businesses or homes in our community that kind of get donated to us. We'll do real life training in them. Sometimes we'll do real burns in them. What we were doing is Mayday scenarios though for downed firefighters that were trapped. And we've had multiple injuries come out of this training. We're a 500-600 person department, and we start implementing more safety practices. And then we're actually starting to implement matrices to reduce injury. And some of that is necessary, and I get it. There's also a lot of research out there from other industries that would suggest the more safety practices that you put into place actually makes the environment more dangerous, because nature does not adjust to our level of skill. The fire ground is indifferent to our capabilities. It's something I've been saying a lot. We can do everything right. Bad things are still going to happen. And so we need to, as much as we can, get into these real environments and train. So sometimes bad things may happen. We have that a lot
when we're training with chipboard and in steel buildings and stuff like that. Steel building doesn't behave like a structure if it's a brick built property, like single glazed properties. In the States and Australia, this was the thing we were speaking about ventilation the other day, but I won't spend too much time here because I know I've just interrupted you. But like speaking about the fire dynamics and ventilation profiles of these different buildings and the reality of having realistic training scenarios is so essential, because like you say, fire is like it's like a petulant child. You'll set up all these plans and it just comes and kicks the shit out of your plan.
Yes.
It's like fire is just to whom it may concern.
Right.
I don't give a shit who is showing up.
Yes.
I'm just gonna and like you say, there's a real discrepancy, and I love what you put there between our capabilities and what's actually happening on the fire ground.
Yeah, it's totally different. And that's something that we're seeing is we can take face value metrics and we can implement these safety practices and we can say, well, what do we need to change? But when we zoom out, you look at the performance of the individual, what we're seeing, more of the fire ground officers that are spending time in the real environments and the training officers are like, actually, I think our performance is getting worse in that people aren't as fit as they used to be. They're not comfortable in their own PPE. They're not comfortable in their own gear, and you can tell. And so when they go into these environments, they're more shaky. It doesn't feel like a second set of skin. It feels like you put on this massive snowsuit and you're going into these environments and you're not physically prepared for them with all the weight on your joints now. And so if we were to maybe address the human performance side of it, the physical performance, and making sure you're comfortable in your gear in a low visibility environment, these injuries would drastically drop. So maybe instead of taking more responsibility away from us, maybe we place it back on the individual and make them better prepared.
But that starts to feel like, I'm going to play the devil's advocate of, it feels like for people who have a different justification in their head, it feels like a personal attack. Because when I say, you're not adhering to the procedure, your training tactics are a little bit off. You're like, oh, okay, well, that's me as a firefighter, and maybe I need to get a little bit better at that, or, that's because my station does that, or my department does this or that. When I'm saying you're not fit enough, you're not strong enough, I mean, that John McDonough guy that we referenced before, I can't remember what episode he was on, but we just spent some more time with him, and he has these 4 non-negotiables, and we went through them when we were looking at going into the property and what you assume people are going to do versus what you think they're going to do. And he based it down to 4 task level actions that you must perform to meet the expectations of the officer in charge, so that I can place my tactical plan on these non-negotiables that I know you're going to do, in order for me to have reliance on you. And the first one was simply stay low. Stay low, and then it was cool the smoke, identify flow paths, and put the fire out. It was 4 simple ones, and there's some great diagrams he's got I'm going to share with people. But the first one about stay low, it sounds obvious because, the thermal layer and visibility and all this sort of jazz. But we were training with 45, so there's a variety of 45 mil hose, 52, 64, 70 mil hoses that we use in the UK. But you guys, first aid reels, do you refer to them as first aid reels where you are?
No, I'm assuming it's like the small rubber, like the thin...
The small rubber non-percolating hose reel.
Yeah, we call that our booster line.
Okay, so we use that in a lot of places as a primary form of firefighting media.
Oh, nice.
And the training scar that has evolved, it's kind of nice because it's lighter and more maneuverable and all that jazz. But in terms of heat release rate and kilowatts of energy from the fire and all those dynamics, which with the greatest respect, most people don't understand because they haven't done that level of training. And this is not me flexing. I didn't know any of this shit before a couple of years ago. And I'd probably been in the fire service 12 years before anyone had taught me any of this. Right. And this is what I was saying before about like the more your awareness grows, the more you realize the just absolute absence of your knowledge in a lot of places. But that stay low element. So we're training with these 45s, and people are right down in that kind of lunged squat position. You might transition to knees and then back up, but you're progressing the line, basically driving off that front foot and just pulling your lunged leg behind you, maybe going half a meter at a time, which is, from all the videos and stuff, predominantly what you guys and girls appear to be doing in the States anyway. You tend to operate with a much higher flow rate, a much higher, you throw gallons and gallons. There's nothing wrong with that inherently. We're not going to get into that conversation at this moment in time, but just the element of staying low. We must have had 30 instructors there from across the whole of the UK at this event that we were at. And that mobility aspect crushed people. Just like they not as in they found it really hard to do it. They couldn't do it.
And it's a foundational skill, right? It's basic.
Because what they were getting used to do was doing this BA shuffle thing that we do, sweeping, stamping, throwing your arm over your head, which I get in case the floor is unstable and whatever. But they're doing all of that stood up. And then eventually when they get to the fire compartment, they're still waddling in there and then dropping down onto a knee and going, fuck me, this is really hard. But they're not, do you know what I mean? But if you've got a fire that's already ventilated, it's already gone through flashover, fire growth, blah, 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 and it's pushing that flow path as you're progressing against it, you can't have that get up, walk, stop, this is a bit hot, let's get down again. And equally stood up trying to use your thermal imaging camera, you're not getting, and all this stuff that I probably could get into right now, but staying low, the physical elements of it. Echoing back to setting people up to fail with such low physical entry requirements with a natural, it's only going to degrade over time. Have you seen, in fact, tell me in a minute what your entry selection test is, and have you seen what the Canadians do in terms of physicals?
I haven't not seen the Canadians. I actually just had mine yesterday, and this is all different depending on state. For the entry, that we have what we call a CPAT, Candidate Physical Agility Test, which is very similar to like the firefighter combat challenge that you see on TV, where you're in gear and you're doing the stair mill and running saws and advancing hose lines, raising ladders, using the pike pole on weights. You have to do that in a certain amount of time with a certain amount of weight. And if you get within the time frame and you don't go over, then you can be selected. Then you move on to the next process. The next physical.
But you do that all in one thing, don't you? It's like a running test from one element to the next, or do you do them in isolation?
So to prepare, they'll allow you to do it in isolation. But once you test, you have 3 chances. You have to do it all in less than, it used to be 10.5 minutes. Now it may have increased a little bit. But yeah, you have to do it all in one fell swoop. You have to knock it out.
So and do you still do the CPAT every year then? Is that continue running, or does it?
So here's the thing. That's just to become a firefighter to apply and enter. Now, we don't, in our jurisdiction, do that. And this is where everybody's different. A lot of people, myself included, advocated for an annual, some type of physical agility test. And a lot of people shot that down because they were worried about the liability and the punitive conversations that would come out of that, which, again, I don't agree with. We do have a yearly physical where we have our stress test. And actually, I just had mine yesterday, my annual physical, and they do the blood work and hearing and vision and all that. But then they also put you on a treadmill, and every 3 minutes they increase the incline, and you've got to hit a certain amount of METs, and you have to go for a certain amount of time based on your age. And even that...
Ours is the same. It's crap.
Yeah, and even then, that still takes I don't want to say a ton, but it definitely takes people off of the floor because they can't pass it. Lasts
for 13 minutes, I think. So the incline increases. The speed stays the same, and the incline increases every 3 minutes, I think it is.
For us, it's every 3 minutes, incline goes up and speed goes up. So I think by the end of it, like I'm running by the end of it.
You're not allowed to run in ours.
Oh, yeah. So you walk as long as you want. Until you
walk
can't,
as long as you
but
can,
you have to hit at least
pumping on that incline.
Yeah, and you have to hit at least 12 METs and reach your heart rate at a certain point, and that's when the test stops. But if you don't reach the right amount of METs, which I think is 12, and you hit your heart rate at a certain point, then you have failed the test essentially.
So your METs is effectively, we work ours off a perceived VO2 max based on like your age, versus your oxygen efficiency and transition and lactic acid and all that bollocks. But it's so low. And in ours, you don't even do it in firefighting gear. You do it in shorts and t-shirt.
Yeah, for us, they hook us up to the EKG, so we're only wearing shorts and running shoes, and they've got the heart rate monitors on us and everything. And here's something interesting. So for me, I'll be 38 in 2 weeks, and I will have, I think my heart rate had to get to 156, which is not a big deal. Like, I train there all the time, but like you said, I'm not in gear. A lot of the research I've been able to pull a lot of really cool facts and metrics from myself and from my friends using like the Whoop bracelet. And I have data from guys who have been on house fires and rescues, who've been on line of duty deaths, who have been on maydays, who have been in crazy fire situations in gear where they're physically, mentally, hormonally just strapped. And the data that we're getting from the metabolic stuff is putting people above their max heart rates, which is just theoretical anyway. The strain, Whoop uses a 0 to 21 scale for strain, 21 being the highest you could possibly get. And I'm seeing firefighters at 19, 20, 20.5 strain in one incident, in one 20, 30-minute evolution. And it's taking elite athletes sometimes hours to get there. And we're doing this in the fire service in gear on a 30-minute incident. And a lot of that, and that's where I do a deep dive on what the adrenaline and hormone dump is doing to you when you're in these crazy environments. But
that thermogenesis, your body's ability, your heat intolerance, and your body's ability to dissipate that, and like you say, when you're in kit and bunker gear, the increased vasodilation, your body's inability to sweat, because these are now highly complex garments. They're not the bunker gear of the past. You know, your blood, your radial cooling and everything like that just drops off significantly because your body's like boiling the bag, isn't it? So it really compresses that initially perceived cycle of progressive overload when you place yourself in those scenarios with realistic kit. So the Canadians do they do it in full bunker gear. And I read it off the other day. I could try and find it again now. But effectively, it's they do a treadmill work to start with, and then they get, I think it's 30 minutes after that to cool down, or to their 30 minutes break, and then they run straight into the job-related tests. So they have to hold a piece of extrication gear against a door and 3 different places for a set period of time, and then they have to pull and push a sled several times with a significant amount of weight on it, and then they do a series of lifts, and then they do a casualty drag, which is 80 kilos. What are your training dummies?
Ours would be, so the heaviest would be 185 pounds. So you're looking at like 90-ish kilos. I think our normal working one is probably about the same as you, the 80 kilos. I think it's about 165 pounds.
No, that's not our normal. So that's the Canadians' normal.
Oh, okay. Got it.
We use 50s.
Oh, interesting.
So that's whatever that is, 120 pounds? Yeah, 140 pounds?
Roughly, yeah, 120 probably.
Bullshit.
Yeah, it's not enough.
You know, people that get stuck in fires are not fit, healthy children usually.
No.
They're not.
No.
They're obese people just struggling with life.
Yes.
You know, they're low socioeconomic, they're overweight, they're
sedentary,
old, ill infirm, sedentary. They're 80, 90 kilos. You know, I weigh 117, I think I weigh.
Yeah.
And I've lost a lot of weight. I was an operational firefighter at 24 stone. And I was full of, you know, steroids and growth hormone and absolutely massive.
Right.
You know, I was, whatever that converts to 14 stone, 24 stone, I don't know what that converts
I'm
to
not
in
sure
kilos.
what stone
I think it's
is.
like 104.
Yeah, I have no idea what stone is.
So a stone, it's 6.9 kilos to a stone. So it's, whatever that is, 12, it's about 16 pounds per stone. So you times that by 24, it's about 380 pounds, something like that.
Oh, wow. With all your gear?
I might have got, my calculation might be off to shit there. But anyway,
Yeah.
I was a big boy.
Yeah.
You know, I was an international strongman. But anyway, the point I'm making is the realism is just setting people up for fail. Do you know what I mean? You go in there and someone's like, oh yeah, well, I'll take the adult and the casualty. No, you fucking won't. You're never going to do that. You will do that because the baby weighs, 15 kilos maximum, and the adult, perceived adult, it weighs 50. So yeah, you're picking up a combined weight of 65 kilos with a baby under your arm. You're never going to do that operationally.
No.
You just can't do it.
No.
And you do that when you're like, great, well now we're just going to do a down firefighter drill in the bays, and you're going to pull me 12 feet.
Yeah.
People just fall to pieces.
Yes, we experience the exact same thing. It's amazing that we're hundreds of miles apart, thousands of miles apart, and we experience the exact same thing. And we're training. We try to make it as real as possible. But these could be very straight, unencumbered drags. We're not talking about up and down steps around debris.
Oh, yeah.
And my crew and I have gone through that in real life with civilians coming out of windows and with our down firefighter, one of our comrades, in what we would consider like a hoarder type space with just debris and packages everywhere. Metabolically, that was the most difficult thing I've ever done. So people underestimate.
That's dialed up since COVID, hasn't it? People hoarding.
Yeah.
People staying at home because now in the world of Amazon delivery and whatever else, and getting all your shopping delivered, if you don't want to, you never need to leave your home.
Never.
Some people are petrified. I think it's worse in the States than it is here. Like, people are still pretty COVID scared in places, I think, in the States, from my limited interpretation. And some people still are not socializing. They're not leaving home. They realize they can work from home, get everything delivered, and they are just growing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And they're just collecting stuff, and you can't use the back door, and you turn up to the house and you just can't see through the front window, and you're like, oh shit.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Actually, I'm dealing that with my grandparents right now. They're from the Depression era of the 1930s, and they're home. They're now getting towards end of life, hospice care, but their home floor to ceiling has been packed. And every time we go in there to start bringing stuff out, there's some great gems in there, but by and large, it's mostly just trash that's been accumulated, and the fire hazard and what it would do to us if we had to go in there is just very eye-opening. Yeah. But it's a human nature.
So there's loads of things I want to talk to you about. I know I've taken you down a bajillion rabbit holes. You probably didn't even anticipate us going in an hour worth of conversation. Well, I don't want to go. I'll tell you what. I want to go first to one of the main things that drew me to you. So first and foremost, total transparency. I've been listening to your podcast for a little while. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you.
I listened to an episode some time ago and then attributed a quote to a guest that you had. We changed it a little bit because I wanted to change it a little bit.
Yeah, all good.
And we gave the attribution.
Yes,
but then
thank
we
you.
made contact, which is fun. Well, mate, I always say there's no original thought anymore. There isn't. Everything you hear and see is just a bastardization of the leaders you've been around, the things you've read. There's very few things of original thought anymore. So that came from you guys, and we'll put the links for people to go and hear the episode, which I'm just trying to cast my mind back. Which episode was that? Because it was a powerful conversation.
That one I think was episode 17 with Battalion Chief John Bean, where we talked about our line of duty incident.
Yeah. So that was a really powerful one. Your line of duty incident was the one I then listened to, and I think you debriefed it with, like you say, with a colleague of yours. You both attended, didn't you?
Yeah, so we had a couple podcasts. One of the first ones was myself and my backup guy, one of my best friends, Andy, where we talked about kind of the aftermath of the line of duty incident and kind of the mental health and things that came post that incident. And then we actually broke down the incident with the battalion chief, who was one of the command officers there, and we were the RIT team that went to go in and get our guy. And then actually in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be sitting down with his wife and another widow from a line of duty death in our area, and we're going to talk about their experiences. So that's coming up in a couple of weeks as well.
Hey, powerful.
It's going to be very powerful.
We've never done that. And it's something that we struggle to close the loop on stuff like that. And I think we would have a lot of pushback from people just in the UK. I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong, because I think it's really powerful. People want to hear. That's kind of, we learn through stories, don't we?
We do.
I'll say that's how the Bible was written. Do you know what I mean? That's why it's so powerful. Never tell a story without making a point. Never make a point without telling a story.
I like that.
Do you know what I mean? Because that's how we learn.
It is.
We learn through other people's experiences. So I think that's going to be such a powerful episode, mate. We'll be sure to share that when it comes out. But cycle us all the way back and just give us some big, broad brushstrokes around Woodscape and the incident that we're going to talk about. Try and give us some context of kind of where you were in your career, and then take us into what the tip out was, what the job was.
Yeah. So a very long story short, it was the middle of summer. This was in 2018. And I was a lieutenant assigned to an engine company. And at my firehouse, we have an engine company and a ladder truck. So there was a captain on the ladder truck. And we have 4 personnel on each. So we had 8 total people between the 2 trucks. And a fire comes out from a lightning strike. So a lightning strike, big storm came through, hit a tree, ran the root system, lit off an underground propane tank that fed the house. Now, the house, the finished living spaces, the main level to include the basement was 8,300 square feet, which I'm not even sure what that would translate for your all's metrics, but basically it's a mansion. It is a massive mansion.
Yeah.
It basically 4 standard American homes of 2,000 square feet would be inside of this one structure. And that doesn't include a crawl space. So the crawl space would be underneath the main level of the home, but above the basement. It was this weird underground offset level, which is very atypical. And that's where the bulk of the fire was centered because of these gas lines that ignited from the lightning strike. So
that really is like you were saying, training realistic scenarios before. Imagine you briefing that. It's like shark-infested custard and the helicopter comes down. Well, if you said like a training scenario and it started with, so there's a lightning strike, people are like, yeah, fuck off, Josh. You know what I mean? There's no fucking lightning strike. Lightning strike hits an underground propane tank, and they're like, he's making this shit up. Do you know what I mean? But we will share links to this because there's been a number of articles written about it. But just, you said underground crawl space, that terminology, and I might do this regularly, sorry, just to keep everyone
please,
on the mental pathway as we progress. Could you just expand on what that looks like for people that have perhaps never visited the States? Because again, the complexity of how the buildings are made up, other than some big cities in the UK, large and wide, we've gotten rid of a lot of basements, or they've been converted into living spaces, and they've got a lot of fire protection in them. But in the States, things are still very different.
Vastly different, yeah. So to give more context, this area, we're right in between Washington, D.C. and Baltimore City. So we're basically, for just conversational purposes, 20 to 30 minute drive to both. So we're smack dab in the middle of Maryland. And here in this area of the county, we consider it a single family home. So it's not attached to anything else. It's its own standalone structure, but it's all wood. It's all wood. It has a brick facade, a brick veneer on the front. It is not sprinklered, and that's pretty common for our area. Newer construction is sprinklered, but a lot of the older stuff is not. This is a home that was probably built in the 1980s.
Do you have sprinklers mandated in residential now?
For our area, for new construction, yes. But
we don't.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Ever. Anywhere.
Yeah, that's
unless it's a high rise or a building above a certain floor. We don't mandate it, so you'll almost never go to, unless it's a small hotel or something like that. No residential homes. Yeah. It's an exaggeration. Some people will have done it themselves, but they won't have had to. That was out of sheer choice and probably affordability.
Yeah, and this is, again, widely different throughout the entire nation.
Ever heard the quote that true leaders are readers? Well, we believe this is true. Listeners often ask where we go to keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening in the sector globally. So there are a few key publications which I encourage you to go check out. Now, if you're looking for insights on disaster management, fire protection, and firefighting, for us, we go to Asia Pacific Fire Magazine. And when you're looking for the latest on the Middle East fire protection industry and fire services, it's Gulf Fire Magazine. And our quarterly check-in is with International Firefighter Magazine, reporting to municipal, industrial, and fire training professionals. Now, next up, and widely accepted to be the global voice for passive and active fire protection. This is a good one. It's International Fire Protection Magazine. And finally, and perhaps the most relevant to our predominantly UK audience, I'd strongly suggest subscribing to UK Fire Magazine, reporting to the United Kingdom fire protection industry and fire services. We're really excited to announce that after a long-standing relationship and mutual respect, we've now partnered with MDM Publishing, who bring you all of these essential publications. Because in a world of change, the learners shall inherit the earth, while the learned shall find themselves perfectly suited for a world that no longer exists. Eric Hoffer said that, and I believe he was right. So keep growing, keep learning, and keep yourself in the know and at the cutting edge of what's happening globally by dropping into the notes. And as a gift from the podcast, you can actually subscribe to any of these publications for free using the link in our notes. Now back to the show.
We can drive to every city and county that surround us, and they will all have different policies and regulations. So wildly different depending on where we're at. Okay. But yeah, completely wooden structure. And the gas lines would feed the appliances like fireplaces and the dryers and those types of things. And they used to be on oil heat. So in this crawl space, well, actually, let me back up. The main level, so the main floor you come in on had like grand inch thick imported tile from Italy throughout the main part of the home. They were doctors and politicians from the area. The basement had full-blown like movie theaters and weight rooms and bars. Like it was a very nice, well-appointed home. So like I said, 8,400 square feet total with that crawl space.
I've got the conversion. That's 770 square meters for the UK.
Okay, thank you. I was trying to pull it up on my phone.
That's massive.
Yeah, okay.
That's massive.
And then the crawl space itself was 1,000 square feet. Whoa. So, and in that crawl space was catering equipment for a 70-person party. There was old few hundred gallon oil storage tanks that were no longer being used, tables, chairs, all the decorations for all the different holidays. It was just jam-packed with like little pathways to get around. And it was underground, so the basement being block wall. So when you show up to the front side of the home, it was 2 stories. When you show up and you go around to the back side of the home, it would have been 3 stories with at-grade basement access. But because of grade changes and all kinds of stuff, it was very confusing for command at 3 o'clock in the morning to understand the layout of the home.
We have those difficulties with a lot of country homes now where they have a drop-off at the back.
Yep, exactly.
And they've converted it. They have big bifold doors and glass fronts on the back of them. And that terminology, certainly when you start sectorizing an incident, can create a lot of... I always think the fog of war, as what's his face, always Jocko Willink always talks about, those different interpretations of flaws and location and variation. That's where they, like the military analogy, they get their blue on blues. Like we can be entering into a sector or deploying a tactical ventilation profile to one floor, but on the back, nothing, like we said about our skills base, nothing acts independently. You're all interacting with this thing from different angles and different ways, and there will be a trade-off as to what your action is.
Absolutely. And we were absolutely susceptible to that evening. With command being task saturated, we operated under a command structure where so much information funneled to that person. So we had to pull that person away when we were asking them for different tactics and operations and requests. But the long story being short, the initial crews on scene had trouble finding the fire because it was in the crawl space below the main level but above the basement and still underground. And it only had one access point that could only be accessed from the basement. So once you found it in the basement, you had to go up a half set of steps basically into this block wall 4 to 5 foot tall, 1,000 square foot room with all the stuff in it, all the bullshit in it.
Massive fire load, and I bet the heat release rate was fucking unbelievable in there.
So that's how it started. And because crews were jockeying up and down levels on the main level and going to the basement, couldn't find it. Whenever they opened the basement door talking about flow paths, it would introduce fire into the basement, which would find the crawl space. It would break through the main level of the home, and you'd see fire on the main level. So, and as soon as you close the basement door, the fire would darken and would go away. You couldn't find it. So crews were constantly leapfrogging between two spots. And eventually, fire broke out on the main level. Crews went in, and firefighter Nathan Flynn pulled a hose line trying to attack the fire, and he fell into the hole that was in the basement. Into the crawl space. Once there were still people on the backside, on the lower basement side, they pulled the door shut, so it shut down the flow path and kind of knocked down the fire as Nate was going in, so it wasn't readily visible, and he went into the hole. Now, I was on a typical box alarm for us, we have 4 to 5 engines and 3 ladder trucks and all the different ambulances and chief's cars and all that. We were the third due engine and second due ladder truck. So by nature of our position on the fire ground and how our orders work, we knew that we were going to be the RIT team, the rescue team. Do you guys use RIT terminology?
We don't use RIT terminology. So every time we progress to what we'd call stage 1 engine control, so we have, and there's lots of rabbit holes for us to explore here, engine control procedures. So do you guys, so when we were out speaking with Top Floor Tactics, Mickey Farrell, it's the first time for a lot of our listeners that they were introduced to the concept of truckies versus engine.
Yeah, okay.
That have seen Chicago Fire Engine. But they're like, they couldn't comprehend.
Okay.
And I apologize if it's different to you, but like the truckies going in for identification of the seat of fire and search and rescue.
Yeah.
But they don't take, unless it's different here, they don't take a primary hose line in with the engine team, the engine crews will do the main fire attack. Is that the same for where you are? And then your search and rescue teams will be locating ventilation ports, creating vents, and searching.
Yeah, so because we're kind of from the same region, I actually know Mickey. We just did a conference together in back in March at another area.
He's crushing it.
He's fantastic. Yeah, he's a great guy. Ton of amazing knowledge. We're kind of from the same region, which we call the Mid-Atlantic, from New York to Maryland, D.C., where I'm from. So a lot of very similar tactics. New York is a crazy, massive department, and they do things kind of their own way, but a lot of similarities. Though.
We have that with London in the UK. So because they're so big, like a lot of services and departments are around 500 to 700 operational staff. London's got like 5,000.
Oh, wow.
So they kind of were a bit of a law unto their own sometimes because they can deploy tactics, but they align predominantly to what we call national operational guidance, but they will invest in equipment that other places won't invest in, and some of their tactics are a little bit different. No better or worse.
Yep. Just different. Yeah.
So take me back. So for was he on a truck? Was he a truckie? Was he an engine crew? Just to help people understand. Because when people are hearing that, they might have in their mind and wanting to us to address the analogy that, well, hang on a minute. So we've recognized the fires underneath. What the fuck is he doing on that floor? Well, because we've got a real aversion to sending people above the fire, which is frustrating in places because it's all contextual.
Sure.
But take us through a few of them hurdles if you can.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the clarifying questions. So Nate was on an engine company, so his main task is to pull the hose and do fire extinguishment. At the time, there were probably 3 engines and 2 ladder trucks on scene to include the command officers and whatnot. So the truck companies are trying to go in and search and find the fire. Now, we still didn't know that the fire was in that crawl space or in the basement. We had a lot of clues telling us that it was in a lower level. But whenever the basement door got open and you would see fire on the main level, it just looked like fire on the main level. It didn't look like it was fire coming from a lower floor or space. So that created a ton of confusion.
Do your truckies go in with an extinguishing media? Sorry, just address that.
Yeah, oftentimes we do. We have a pressurized water can. And there's one riding position that a lot of times will.
People have like a Scotty backpack analogy where it carries like, I'm going to get this wrong, 40, 50 litres, maybe less. And we use that for wildfire tactics or small bin fires and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So when you say they go in with a pressurized, just help people understand that. And I'm sorry, I keep pausing you for
please, this is great.
Because people will be like, you're sending a crew in with no firefighting media. Like, we would never do that. And that's why it takes us so long.
Yeah.
Because you could get in there, do anti-ventilation, suppress the fire, close the door, whatever, lock it up before your engine crew gets there. And I get the dynamic. And this is what I try to say to people sometimes when you start exploring these conversations with people outside of the UK Fire Service. I'm like, people think Americans are all dangerous. Big generalized statement. They're like, well, of course they all die. I'm like, well, actually they don't. If you look at the size of their services, they have less line of duty deaths on average than we do.
Oh, wow.
You just see them more on social media.
Yeah. Oh, that's super
And most of that
interesting.
shit's fucking decades old.
Right.
Oh, look, they all fall for roofs. What the fuck are they doing? Well, no, steady.
Yeah.
Understand that the most natural ventilation profile is vertical ventilation, and it'll have the most effect of clearing all the smoke, allowing the heat release and all that sort of jazz. Yes, sometimes they get it wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that so I'm not going to go down those rabbit holes, but just what's the quantity of that media package, the firefighting media that they take in with the truckies? And just to clarify, that it's not attached to a truck, just so people understand this is they take that in with them.
Yeah, no. So it's a pressurized water can that has, I believe it's 2.5 gallons, which there's 3 liters in a gallon, 4 liters in a gallon.
We're gonna have to keep doing this.
I think it's 3.7 liters to a gallon.
It is. You just pulled it up in front of me. Well done.
Okay.
So yeah, it's 3.7 to a gallon. So you're still only going in with 12 liters. So you say 4 gallons?
No, 2.5.
2.5. So you've got 7 liters.
Yeah. So it's not
8.5 liters, something like that.
So, and we use that, and there's only one riding position that will take that with them. And on this night, nobody brought that in with them because, in our eyes, for what we were dealing with, it wasn't a necessary tool. Now, on a lot of single family or residential fires, we will bring that in. And there's been plenty of times where we've been on fires where it's meant to extinguish small fires or like bedroom fires. Like, it keeps the fire in check, and then we can close the door and wait for the engine company.
Final annoying question on
please.
that. What's it pressurized to? And do you know the nozzle or branch that's on it? Just, I know I'm getting annoying and technical if you don't know.
Yeah, no, it's all good.
Skip over it.
I don't know the PSI. I want to say 25 PSI off the top of my head. 25 to 30.
Okay.
I could be wrong. And it's like a very small smooth bore nozzle. And it's smaller than a garden hose.
So people who know PSI, pounds per square inch for their tires. So 25 PSI is just 1.7 bar. So the ability to, and again, this all depends on actual pressure at the nozzle and the diameter of the line and all this sort of stuff. But I'm just trying to help people understand. So if you did locate a fire in X bedroom, you've got 8 liters operating at 2 bar that you could maybe do an initial attack. Yeah. And if you get in a good dissipation and you're actually hitting the fire, that could be very effective.
Yeah.
Hit it with that, take some heat out, close the door down, suffocate it, and you've got a branch line progressing with the engine crew coming up, and you just radio to them where exactly it is. Saves them fucking about going in every room.
Yeah, and there's some fantastic training companies in the States that have done awesome research and do really great training for how much fire you can actually put out with these cans. And let's say you bring 2 cans in with you, which is kind of rare, but if it did happen, it can really either knock down fire, or at least keep it in check for you while you're doing some stuff. And so our hand lines, I was pulling this up earlier. We don't use those booster reels like we talked about. We used them in the 80s and 90s, but I think your 45 millimeter line is our 1 3/4 line, which is like our standard attack line. Okay. And that's what was pretty much there the entire evening, was for all the lines that were coming off engines would be like a 45 millimeter line for our attack lines.
So my apology for taking us there, but was useful, to be fair. And I know I keep interrupting the flow.
Yeah,
but,
no. This
so
is great.
He's gone in, we've closed it down.
Yes.
Fire was initially exposed. He's gone through the floor. Is he part of a team of, take us back, sorry, just to SCBA for a second. So I spoke about engine control procedures. Our crews, so we have a rapid deployment option where they don't need anyone stood outside. And this is a controversial thing. Like, do you have engine control officers? Do you have anything like that? Do you have someone watching a board that looks at how much air they have in their tanks and as it goes down?
Not really. We have the capability. So this is really interesting. We have the capability.
I was speaking to a Swedish firefighter a little while ago and he was like, why don't you just have competent BA wearers? He's like, why have you got someone? Why have you got someone stood there watching the air go down to tell you when your air's going out to run out?
Yeah,
well, because we train turnaround times, we train gauge pressures, and blah 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 blah. We seem to have just put that, and I know some people might be screaming at the radios, fucking radios, who's not fucking 90s era, might be screaming or whatever, going, Pete, we do it because so-and-so died. Okay, yeah. I get it, I'm sorry. Yeah, but what a waste of a resource to have one person just stood there. And the argument as well is that person does other stuff. They write down the route paths, they write down the search procedures, where they've gone, what they've taken with them, and they are a conduit of the commanding officer's span of control. So they just control all the SCBA. But do you have everyone on the same radio channel with all the BA, with all the SCBA as well?
Yeah, so when we respond
you just
to
have
a
one
fire, we just
channel.
have one fireground, what we call a tactical channel that we put everybody on, that everybody talks on. And we do try to maintain good radio discipline and not talk unless it's a truly important message.
That's what John said. He was like, if you open up the channels, people think you're just going to be filled with stuff like John's down the street going, guys, I'm struggling to find the hydrant. He's not going to fucking do that. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, because when you open up the channels, people only pass vital communication.
Yes, that's the idea.
Because they don't talk bollocks on there because they realize everyone's listening.
Yeah, that's the hope. And it definitely happens sometimes. Yeah. But we manage our own air. So when we get to the level where our bells might start ringing for the low air alarm, or hopefully before that happens, we're managing our own air. We're talking within each other in the environment, like, "Hey, you still good?" Yeah, we manage that.
Do you get to choose when you don as well? When you don your SCBA?
We come off the apparatus with it on our backs. Is that what you mean?
With it on your backs, but I mean, you're approaching the front of the structure. Do you wait for a brief from the commanding officer to say, Josh, I want the two of you to go in, stay on the first floor, stick to the left-hand wall?
Sometimes, but more often than not, our orders basically create the expectations for us. So we are allowed to deviate if we need to. We know if I show up as the first arriving engine company that I'm going interior, I'm going to go in. And now as soon as we hit the threshold, or if we have an environment that would be dangerous to breathe in, then we'll go on air and say, if I'm on engine 71, engine 71 to command, we're entering through the side alpha front door, reporting to the second level to knock down a bedroom fire. So that way he knows that what unit's going in, where we're going, what we're doing. And that we call that a pair check. Everybody in the States is going to do it a little differently though.
Does the commanding officer have to note that down anywhere?
They have a command sheet that they usually write those things down and they follow and track units. But that is coming down to the command officer. And we always have 2 battalion chiefs on every fire. So the 2nd battalion chief might be more forward deployed, or maybe on the back side of the structures, another set of eyes or another point of accountability. But to have one person at the front saying, okay, this is where you're going, this is your air usage, anything like that, we don't really have. We do have a tier level of that, but that is used almost never. And that's probably more so for like
when
hazmat.
You get really, really high complex incidents with vast amounts of breathing apparatus deployed. Yeah, we call that BA sector, where there'll be someone managing all the cylinders, the sets, the rotations, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But even at the base level. So is there a minimum crew size for structural firefighting? Like, do you have to go in as a team of 2?
Yeah, so I think you mentioned it for what you all have. OSHA is who kind of mandates that. It's a federal requirement. And there's supposed to be at least 2 people outside. And before we're allowed to go interior, unless we could say that we're somebody to rescue, and then that goes out the window and we can go in by ourselves without having 2 people waiting for us outside. So we call that...
Sorry, no, when you go in, do you go in as a minimum team of 2?
Yes, ideally a minimum team of 2. Most times it will be 3 or 4. And sometimes crews will also team up and marry up and go in together as well.
Well, that's another thing as well. It's a training scar from us, because we are so conditioned to just using that first aid reel, that hose reel. You can manage that as a team of 2. So then when we do transition, and I'm like, well, I can see what's on fire in there. I know the rough heat release rate. You haven't got enough capacity for effective firefighting with that, so I'm going to send you in with a 45. And they're like, oh, fucking hell, I'm going to have to drag this heavy. And you're right, as a team of 2, that's really hard.
Sure, yeah. That is our
but we get
bread
conditioned to that. That's one of those that's, exactly, that's your bread and butter.
Yeah. For us, so me being an officer, I'll always have 2 firefighters in the back. So those will be the hands on the hose guys bringing it in, and I'm more the eyes and ears, finding where the fire is, searching my way up. I'll help them out if they need it, and depending on, we're going to get stuck in metrics again. So like some of our longest lines are 400 feet, so it's like 130 meters, give or take.
Single line?
A single line for a 45 millimeter line.
Is that coupled?
Yes.
Or that's just a single, right, so that's when it's all coupled
It's all
up.
coupled and pre-connected to our engines, yeah.
Yeah, you see, I love that. Some services have adopted that again, where they've got 245s flaked, we'll call it flaked, on the back of the truck or on one of the side lockers, which you guys have pretty much on all your trucks, don't you?
Yeah.
Most of ours is rolled.
Oh, okay.
So you can't just, we have what's called Dutch roll, where you can just, it's halved in itself and then rolled.
Yes.
So you could just grab two couplings and throw it out.
Yeah, gotcha.
Couple two lines together, and then you've got a stretch line you can go straight away with. But most of them aren't like that. They're rolled. So it becomes, so when I say to people like, right, we're going to set up a line of 52, 4 lengths in the line with a whatever branch on the end, because you're going to progress to the first floor, you're going to need enough to stretch. They will go, oh, fucking hell, it's going to take ages to get that out. They won't say that on the radio.
Right.
But like, if we're talking about what, they wouldn't do that on the radio.
Sure.
They just silently go, fucking hell. But when I say that to other commanders, and they're like, no, it's going to take too much time, I'm just going to send them in with a reel. And I'm like, yeah, but if you send them in with a reel, they're likely not going to have enough velocity, enough pressure, enough penetration for A, effective gas cooling, or B, when they get to the origin, the seat of origin of the fire, they're not going to have but they're like, yeah, but the speed of attack is going to be quicker. And I'm like, yes, but if you just trained more with the heavy line, you would get quicker at it as well. And I'm not done it yet, but I want to run some drills in my training department where we just film the whole thing and time them, because people, what they end up doing is just getting lazy with a hose reel.
Oh,
so
sure.
the hose reel takes ages. It takes ages to get off.
Yeah.
And they might as well have and I'm just like, anyway, I know I'm getting into semantics and stuff like this. I'll try not to interrupt constantly, but some of it's useful, hopefully.
Oh, yeah, no, because I want to make sure the context is accurate so people understand where we're coming from, too. So the 45 millimeter line is like our lightest line. So it's interesting to hear, like, that's the heavy one. That's our light one,
some of ours go up to 64s and some have 70s, but they would probably never's a bit of a long time, unless it was a confirmed basement fire that we'd been struggling with, or high fire loading in a warehouse, or you're going to put in place some ground monitors. They probably wouldn't use a 70.
Yeah.
They would use a dividing branch at the end of it and consolidate down to a 45 or less.
So I think for our 70 would probably be our 2.5-inch line, which is our standard line for high-rise fires. Yep. So anything over 7 floors, we're always bringing what's probably the equivalent of a 70. Yeah.
We'll have a 70 or a 64 coming from the outlet, and then we'll split into 52s or 45s, usually in most services, and then they'll advance on that. But anyway, so Truckee team's gone in, they're searching, they've not found it. I'm assuming they've gone to the second, they've covered the first. He's gone in, no one's yet found the seat of fire, there's a lot of smoke, but they've not found where it is. He's gone in, I imagine there's a crew of 3, but they're managing the line, and he's gone through the floor.
Yes, so he was teamed up with one other engine company and one truck company. So altogether, there was probably 6 to 8 people together going from the main level of the home to the basement and back, just jockeying between the two, trying to find the fire. He was one of the first ones in, went through the hole in the floor, and then everybody was still coming up to meet him and assist with pulling lines, more hand lines. And as they went into the structure, they knew that he went in. So his officer and a firefighter from another engine and the first due ladder truck were inside. So we'll say 6 people. I don't remember exactly how many.
Does every crew member have a radio?
Yes, we all have. Every single person has a radio.
We don't.
Oh, wow.
Fucking.
Yeah.
Another We're trying to get there. Apparently they're too expensive.
They're mad. I think they're like $7,000 a piece for us. It's insane.
Yeah, I know. And they are expensive. But we have instances where one wearer gets lost.
Oh, absolutely.
And they're not the one with the radio.
That's the reason why we all have radios now, is because too many things
They set off their distress signal unit, but that doesn't always help you locate them.
Exactly.
It's a noise coming from somewhere in the echo chamber of the fire compartment.
Yeah.
But anyway.
So when he went in, a lot of the crews were over top of the hole, like hands in the hole, trying to get to Nate. They were taking a beating. I mean, they're basically at the chimney with all the heat and fire and smoke coming up. Still zero visibility, high heat, and they're just getting completely beat up. And the officer on the ladder truck, very highly experienced, phenomenal human being, was like, we are not going to be able to rescue him from this vantage point. We got to find a lower level. So they started pulling back out.
Was he still conscious?
So Nate we have SCBA data, radio data, Apple Watch data that says that he was alive for 6 minutes. And to his wife, Celeste, who I'll be talking to in a couple of weeks, to her credit, she started a movement called Commit Your Six, which, if you don't do anything else, at least for 6 minutes, make yourself better. Do something to improve, because for 6 minutes, Nate was still alive, drawing on every ounce of training that he could think of to get himself out of that really awful environment.
Has she launched that already? Because we'll provide a link if you could give it to us.
Yeah, so her and two other wives of the fallen have started a group called the Phoenix Advocates. And the
Phoenix Advocates.
Yeah, and they're going to support a lot of firefighter training, also regulations. They have helped change some regulations where I'm at in Maryland to make these structures safer, because of the certain propane line that we're using is called CSST, and it just arcs, and it's caused so many fires from lightning strikes.
No.
So yeah,
we'll find a link to that, and we'll provide that in below if people want to find out.
Yeah, phenomenal woman. So.
If you're a regular listener to the podcast, then chances are you are big into your own personal development and the development of firefighters around you. So I wanted to remind you of our mobile app Drill Book. This is a free training and development resources made by firefighters for firefighters. Heading on to Drillbook, you will find incident debriefs, radio messages, knots and lines, quick reference guides, quizzes every single day. We've got useful links to the ERG, to Web Rescue, to Jessup, Euro Rescue, 10-second triage, National Operational Guidance, and not to mention our daily quizzes where you will find questions on extrication, casualty handling, breathing apparatus, fire development, water rescue, rope rescue, you name it. It is the go-to resource if you've got a spare 5 minutes on the firehouse to develop yourself and those around you. Not only that, if you're looking to get into the fire service, we've got advice on there on interview questions, interview answers. You can build your own questioning in there. And again, remember, this is built by firefighters for firefighters, so you can add your own drills in there. You can pick the drills that you find the most favorite. There is literally hundreds of training ideas, hundreds of drills in there. Remember, this app is absolutely free and it grows every single day down to the contributions of our thousands and thousands of users. It's freely available on Android, Apple, and you will find it in the links for this podcast. Remember, it's called personal development. The clue's in the name. You've got to work twice as hard on yourself as you do on the job. So always be growing, always be developing. Now let's get back to the show.
As those crews pulled out, so I was on the engine, the other captain being on the ladder truck, and our crews together, we were assigned RIT, so Rapid Intervention Team. And our sole responsibility is to go in and find downed firefighters during Mayday situations. And that's common on all box alarms. Usually for us, at least, it's the third due engine and second or third due truck, usually the third due truck that is assigned this RIT position on a fire. So we went around to the backside where the basement was, and we were held up for a little while, which was really hard for us to just sit there while they got accountability of all the crews. There were other missing firefighters for a little bit. The short version of this side of it is when we went in, we had to go through this 1,100 square foot basement that had the movie theater and the weight room and the bar and all this. It's a massive mansion home. So we had to search our way up. We went through the basement. We made our way all the way back to the front side of the house in the basement and found a half set of steps. Normally, we don't find half sets of steps in homes like this, so we didn't know we were going into a crawl space until days later after we started doing the investigation. Once we got to the top of the crawl space, we could hear Nate's pass device. His SCBA was in alarm from not moving, and we knew he was up ahead of us. So we still had high heat, zero visibility. With us, we had 7 people, including myself. We had one hand line and just hand tools. And our hand line was the 45 millimeter Ours was 300 feet, so about 100 meters long. And we only had maybe 25 feet of line left before we were going to be completely run out. So, and we're now over an hour and 15, an hour and 20 minutes of burn time without any water being applied to this structure yet. So it was well advanced fire. As myself and a couple crew members were advancing to try to go get Nate, something happened to where wires just dropped down on top of us, and we got tangled. I could feel the wires pull across my chest. I wasn't really tangled up yet, so I thought I could get underneath the wires to get to Nate. But I thought that, well, once I get to Nate, I'm going to have to go right back through this mess. So I clear him out of my way with my cable cutters. And I looked at my lineman, who's an amazing, highly experienced firefighter. He was kind of hunched over, which I thought was kind of an awkward position to be in. I had a little bit of light from the fire to be able to see what was going on. He was wrapped so tight in the wires, and the bail of the nozzle was wrapped down so tight he couldn't even open the bail. So in the fire, he calls me bro. He's like, bro, I'm stuck. The nozzle's stuck. I can't open the line. So we cut him loose, cut the bail of the nozzle loose. And this was the first time any water had been applied to this fire. The officer of the truck captain also was getting tangled. We got him cleared. Other firefighters on the ladder truck that were there with us were helping clear wires and clear the space out. And my backup firefighter, Andy Hoffman, had no idea any of this was going on. He searched his way up to Nate. I guess he went around to the side of us enough to where he never got stuck in the wires. Got to Nate Flynn. He repackaged him really quick. He had his transfill line out, so if we had to do an air exchange with our BAs, he was ready. But Nate, to his credit, kept all of his gear on. You could tell he didn't panic where he's ripping face pieces off or doing anything like that. He still had air in his cylinder. And I had gotten up to Andy, and together we tried to pull Nate out, and he didn't budge. There was so much debris. We're getting physically taxed and exhausted. And I put our crew up against anybody for physical fitness and experience and training. Highly fit crew. So I said, we just got to coordinate this effort. So we're on all fours. We each have a shoulder strap of his SCBA. And we go 1, 2, 3, pull. And he starts to move. And so we just do that on all fours. 1, 2, 3, pull. 1, 2, 3, pull. And we had to pull him probably about 30 feet through this hoarder's condition type structure. We pass him off to the truck crew at the top of the steps, and they take him out through a good portion of the basement. And it was about that time all of our low air alarms started ringing. So we knew we were in our last third of air. We had a 4,500 PSI cylinder. That's what we carry. And we are just physically, mentally, emotionally just completely taxed at this point. You know, I'm a fit guy. I do a lot of high intensity interval training. I'm a big CrossFit trainer. Been doing it for almost 2 decades now, and I'm smashed. I'm absolutely exhausted. We get him through most of the basement. The truck crew has to take a break because they're exhausted. It's such a massive structure. I'd go to grab Nate again. I try to move him, and he doesn't budge. And Nate's a smaller guy comparatively. I mean, dressed out, he's probably 250 pounds, maybe 125 kilos, and just doesn't move. So we actually had a secondary RIT team in place, and one of those guys came in and got Nate out the rest of the way. His own crew was the crew that had to provide care for him. So he was a member of Station 10, which is our special ops station. And his own crew from Station 10 started treating him. The paramedics were there and got him to the hospital. And unfortunately, they pronounced him at the hospital about just a little bit later. So it was a very physically, mentally, emotionally taxing event. It was one of the hardest things physically I've ever done, as well as the training. And obviously, we didn't want to lose one of our own, but it happened that night. And I'm giving you obviously the very short, condensed version right now because it takes. I have like a whole 90-minute presentation that I do.
I know we're gonna link.
Yeah.
It. Yeah.
But yeah, but it's unfortunate. Another one of my colleagues said that it's finding some progress through the pain. So we've taken this incident, and there's been so many training events that have come from it. The ATF, which is one of our federal investigation divisions, helped build the fire models around it. I think if I haven't sent you that, that's like amazing information that I'll have to send you, talking about flow paths and doing a 100%. Deeper dive on that. Yeah. But we're trying to use this, the department and our crews, as well as Nate's wife, Celeste, with the Phoenix Advocates, are just trying to use this event to advance a culture that trains better, prepares better, and maybe even changes regulations. Because unfortunately, it was a couple years later, almost the exact same fire right down the street from where I live. The same thing happened, and firefighter Josh Laird passed away in almost the exact same situation. It happened just a couple miles down the road from me. And so his wife and Celeste, Nate's wife, have teamed up for the Phoenix Advocates and are trying to, do good through the pain.
What was the, so many things there. I want to say what was the reaction in department for the instance, but give me the immediate aftermath, as in, because I remember when you were speaking with your colleague that you were with, and you said about coming out and you sat down behind the building, I think. Yeah. And there's immediate moments of trying to piece together other people's perceptions of what's happened. Were we quick enough? Did we do enough? Trying to piece that all together. Nate's a great firefighter. He shouldn't have been in that. How did he get in that situation? That's not like him. Trying to piece together the what ifs.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the fire service is just really great of trying to fill in holes, right? With a lack of information, we're just naturally, we try to find solutions.
I want to know.
Right? So we're definitely trying to fill gaps and fill the unknown. And we, to some degree, thought that because of our inaction starting out, being held up for 7 minutes, that maybe that is what killed him. Like if we didn't wait for 7 minutes, if we weren't held up by whoever it was that held us up, if that would have done it.
So let's zoom in on that. Yeah. So that roll call analogy. So if we have a BA emergency, we'll commit additional rescue teams and immediately be starting a roll call as well. So if you're already in there and you're wearing, you're committed to the structure, you'll immediately stop what you're doing unless you're directly on the fire. And you will seek out the location of the distress signal unit and you'll try and carry out a rescue and whatever. If you're not committed, you'll make your way to the entry control point, again, if you're not actively doing some aggressive firefighting at some point on the structure. And our roll call may or may not be quicker. Pros and cons, not, it's a very blanket thing, but like that might cycle back. Like people might be saying, oh, well, if they had a bloody entry control operator, if we had that person sat there looking at the air going down, they'd have known where everyone was, they'd have got a roll call done quicker, maybe not. Everyone's a bloody expert in hindsight, aren't they? Like, that roll call did sound like it took a while.
Yeah, when Nate went down and the maydays were sounded, I think we were missing 2 or 3 firefighters. They weren't accounted for. Now, I don't want to say that they were necessarily lost. We just couldn't account for them immediately. Another firefighter was injured when he was making his way out of the structure. So, again, nobody really remembers who that person was that held us up, but we were basically told you are not going inside until we know exactly who the one person is that went down the hole.
So do you expect a physical presence for that, or as in they weren't contactable via radio either?
So that was one of the things that came out of the investigation was Nate was on a separate channel that he didn't know about. He was, our Bravo 1 is our main fireground channel. He was on Bravo 2. And our Alpha, when you go to our Alpha zone, that's our main operations channel. Alpha 2 is where we run all of our EMS incidents and car crashes and things like that, fire alarms. He was probably on Alpha 2 earlier in the shift and just switched over to the Bravo zone and never confirmed that he was on Bravo 1. We also had getting in the weeds, we also had a feature turned on our radios called Last Channel Power Up, which you could turn off your radio and whatever you were on, you could play with every single button, switch everything up. It doesn't matter. When you turn it back on, you would be on the exact same channel you were last on. So that's probably what happened. He thought he maybe switched over to Bravo 1. He turned the radio back on, but he was actually on Bravo 2. So we didn't actually hear his
So you don't
mayday.
do a comms check prior to commitment?
We are trying to do better with that now, but going
because that
in.
will be, and again, it's so impossible. I don't know why I'm even saying it, but like trying to take the personal elements and we're doing a lot of shit wrong. This is not me saying UK is right or wrong or better or worse, but people will be justifying these actions and procedures. But there's like a spectrum, isn't there? Mm-hmm. The safest firefighter in the world never leaves the station.
Exactly.
And all the houses burn down.
Yep.
So your appetite of risk and those elements are very difficult, but they would argue, so at your entry control where you do your initial comms check, that would have negated that even ability for that person to not be reachable.
Yeah, for sure. And the one thing, at least culturally for us, that we'd have to figure out, like the learning curve would be massive, is we probably have close to 35 to 45 people on a single box alarm, if you count every person on every unit. And if half of those units are going interior, that's potentially 24 people that are doing radio checks prior to making entry. And that's a lot of radio checks, using up a lot of airtime. And for us, it's kind of that personal individual discipline where the officer should check in with his crew and make sure. And a lot of times that's happening now. Like they'll turn around as they're going down the road like, hey, are you absolutely fucking sure that you were on the right channel? And verify that. The officer does do like a quick check prior to going interior now, which we mentioned before. So yeah, it's a cultural thing for us, quite honestly. Like it comes down to the personal discipline to do the right thing. But as far as culturally, us doing that on the fire ground over the radio, at least in my region, that's not something that we really do.
Pros and cons for both.
Yep, exactly.
But for better or worse, well, for worse, unfortunately, in Nate's sake, wasn't reachable in this instance. He was on a different radio channel. Yeah. But again, establishing, so just coming back, would that have been, was it a wait until everyone was physically present before we could recommit crews?
It was a wait until they confirmed where the other 2 or 3 missing firefighters were. And once they were confirmed, like we knew where they were, then we were given the go-ahead. Now, it's interesting, the main fireground incident commander thought that we were interior the whole time searching for Nate. It wasn't until the podcast was released years later where me and John Bean were talking about it, did he realize that we were not interior when he thought we were. And again, I even asked the Side Charlie command hey, was that you that made that decision? We don't know, but we were told you are not going in. So again, right, wrong, or indifferent. That was something that we struggled with, and it actually took, I don't want to speak too much out of turn. I can't remember exactly who it was, but I think it was the medical examiner.
Doesn't matter who it was.
Yeah, the medical examiner, I think, told one of the investigators who came to us and said, hey, listen, you could have gone in there the second it happened, and he would have passed before you've gotten to him. Which, in a twisted way, it actually brought a little bit of peace to the crews, knowing that we did everything we could, and by our inaction, it didn't kill him. It's a twisted reality that actually helped us.
I had a similar one with quite early on in my career. It was a disused derelict building, known for drug addicts using it for whatever means. And it was all boarded up on the outside. They'd broken in, basically were using it. And we got there, fire was raging out the ground floor, and it had broken 2 first floor windows, committed the crews. Staircase was heavily involved in fire. One of the members of the crew felt it was safe for them to proceed up the stairs. And this is what I'm saying about, like, so difficult for me or you as the incident commander stood outside, getting 2 pieces. Look, you can see it. I can't see it. But I'm the one that's got to make the decision whether you proceed to the first floor. Yeah. So from the information you're telling me, I'm going to say no. Yeah. Because from my limited understanding externally, I can't see that. I don't know that there's not savable life. Ergo, for us, it still remains persons reported until we can confirm there is no persons in there. But I've not had any confirmed residents. It's a disused building, but someone's broken in. Right. Have they left? Have they not left? Right. Anyway, like 3 hours later, we're using aero ladder platforms and ladders to search the first floor externally, looking through windows and blah, blah, blah. Someone comes down a ladder, tells me, Pete, there's a body in there. I'm like, shit.
Oh, man, yeah.
And I went up and had a look myself. There's a leg sticking out underneath the roof and all the boards that are falling down and all XYZ. Coroner's report quite some time later, died of smoke inhalation.
Mm-hmm.
I, in my mind, was saying, this person's dead when we got there. I saw what it was like when we got there. No one's surviving that. Now, we don't know time of death and blah, 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 but it does still linger in my mind where I'm like, were we just so slow?
Yeah.
They hadn't overdosed. They weren't attacked and left for dead or whatever.
Right.
They died of smoke inhalation. They didn't die of burns. No one ever dies of burns in the fire, usually. But they die of smoke inhalation. Yeah. And that's how this person died. And that sat with me.
Sure.
And probably to an element still does. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I was new in command. I wanted better information from my wearers. But again, in your scenario, perhaps that wouldn't happen. Now, in an alternate universe, the senior firefighter in there goes, well, we're going to proceed to the first floor because I'm making the decision. I think it's safe. Okay, they fall through the first floor. Or I say, go to the first floor. And they fall because there was holes in the first floor. And alternate universe. Firefighter did or didn't die, did or didn't fall through the first floor and break his leg. Whatever.
Yeah.
But you're just like, yeah, but could we have saved that person?
There's always the what if. It's something that gnaws at you and nags at you for a while, but at a certain point, you have to accept it and move on, or else it's just going to eat you alive.
That's the best decision I've made, or the best I could have made with the information I felt I had at hand, and that's we're good salespeople to ourselves, aren't we? It's a coping mechanism, I think.
For sure.
You know, that's how we rationalize it and survive it. Post fire, mental health. What sort of support, and again, we're not throwing stones at departments, mental health is on a big journey of how we serve people, and suicide, unfortunately, is on the rise, certainly amongst the first responder community. How did it feel in terms of the support?
Yeah, so the support, they did a lot, and I give the department credit. They actually brought the entire department to the scene of the fire for weeks to walk everybody through, to cut down on filling gaps and rumors, which I thought was a great move. They had a lot of mental health resources come to the firehouses. Sometimes it was too much. Some people use it as a chip on their shoulder because they felt like they couldn't have, it wasn't their own space anymore, which I understand, but to a certain degree, if the department didn't do that, that could be a greater issue, you know.
You're damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Exactly. So there was that. I'm fortunate where we worked, we were such a tight-knit group that we were so constantly checking on each other and talking with each other and having hard conversations that I really felt like we fared better than maybe most because we forced those conversations to happen. We were constantly checking on each other, and we managed pretty well. And even when we didn't, 2 years later, the pandemic hits, right? So you're locked down, you're not going anywhere. You have to face maybe some demons. I think there was a ton of survivor's guilt. There was just deep-seated repressed things that some of the members were holding on to. And there was a handful of a lot of people, whether it was something from the Woodscape fire or their career, or maybe just something entirely different, but just being in your own head, got professional help, myself included, and it was a life-changing experience. You know, my friend Andy, he is the absolute best version of himself he could possibly be because he went and got the help when he was at an incredible low point, which we talk about. So it's a very real thing. It is a very real thing. You know, I took it for granted when I was younger, but it's made me a more capable human being, which has made me show up better as a husband and a father, and now a leader in the fire service. So, yeah.
Those levels of self-awareness and reflection, I always think like for people that don't have a significant other or they don't have children, you kind of go through an evolution of self-awareness when you realize your impact on others, whether that be boyfriend, girlfriend, colleague. But then when it comes to having a pet or when it comes to having a child, it's kind of forced self-development, isn't it? It's kind of like forced self-reflection, and you're like, I want you to elicit this behavior. What about the way I'm behaving?
Yes.
Because I always say children don't learn, they absorb.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, is there an incongruence between your words and your actions? The way you and mommy are talking to each other, the way you're living your life.
Yeah.
You hate your job, you hate each other, but you're telling me you can crush the world, do your best, try your hardest, treat everyone as you want to be. All that bullshit. Do you know what I mean? Children should be, to an extent, where appropriate, be able to say, well, Daddy, you're not happy.
Yeah.
Why, Mummy, you don't love Daddy anymore, or whatever, or you don't like your job. Why are you telling me these things? And there's that incongruence, isn't there?
Yeah. Oh, I so appreciate that sentiment. We can say as many things as we want. That pales into comparison the example that we're actually living. And I was certainly feeling that. I was replicating things from my childhood, and I could see where I was going down an angry road or just a withdrawn mode. It helps tremendously in the fire service to be able to detach and see awful things and keep going. So it's a blessing in that regard. But when I detach from my wife and daughters and I'm unemotional or I quickly go to a solution when they just need empathy, that's not what they need. And so for me to become more aware of that and learn that, and now also showing up as a leader in the fire service when somebody's struggling and not just throwing solutions at them. I think Simon Sinek, the guy said, sometimes we just need people to sit in the mud with us and talk with us to let us know that it's okay. I'm physically incapable of actually hearing a solution right now because I'm so overwhelmed. Just sit with me for a minute and then we can talk that out,
One little model that I stole from someone, I can't remember who it is, so I'm not going to pretend it was mine, but it's like a Triple H model where, and sometimes it helps to verbalize it, maybe with a partner and you've got a much closer relationship with, but if it's not a partner, spending that first few minutes of the conversation identifying, do you want to be helped? Do you want to be hugged? Or do you want to be heard?
Yeah, I like that.
Which one? Some people just want to vent.
Yes.
They just want to be heard and they want you to be present, paraphrasing, asking open, reflective questions to help them just flesh this thing out. Yeah. Do you want to be helped? Do you want to be solution orientated? I just want to fucking hug. You know what I mean? Because most of the time with your kids, they want to be, most importantly, they want to be heard and hugged, usually. Yeah. Because most of the things you're asking them to do or a challenge they're dealing with in their life is solvable most of the time. Yeah. Feels like the worst thing that's ever happened to them, because it probably is, and they're catastrophizing and the sky is falling. But hitting them with reality and just trying to give them solutions kind of suppresses their ability to communicate. And this is again why I think the growth of podcasts and everything like that, because our ability as communicators is diminishing significantly. I think we crave authentic conversation.
100%.
Because most people aren't listening to us.
No.
Having a good conversational partner is like an oasis in a desert sometimes these days. Do you know what I mean? Because are you listening to understand? Are you listening to hear? Or are you just waiting for your turn to speak?
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that earlier, because that is so true. And you can almost see the people that glaze over, and as you're talking to them, you know that they're already thinking about the next thing they're going to say, and they're not truly listening to you. And I posted a really good graph just the other day it shows timelines of how much time you spend with people like your spouse, your kids, your coworkers, yourself. And it's funny that the people that you care most about, typically with your children, it goes down as you age. Your coworkers, you spend more time. It's like an inverse. You spend more time with your coworkers than you do your wife or your kids early part. And then as you age, coworkers and kids drop off. At a certain point, your spouse may drop off. Time alone increases over time. So the ability to focus on what's important to you in that moment, in that stage of life. Like right now for me, it's being 100% at work, but when I'm not at work, I need to be 100% for my kids and my wife. And I knew, and going back to the mental health side, I learned this to be confident and capable and comfortable in my own skin. I got to be okay with what's happening in my own head. And as I age, that's even more paramount too. And I think, like you said, we just don't give it enough credence maybe.
No, I 100% agree. And I always talk about healthy selfishness in that respect. Like carving out time for yourself, and podcasts and audiobooks have been a nice gift for me. It almost ticks that a insatiable desire for productivity and self-development as well. Oh, no, I'm learning shit. But I'm also pausing and self-reflecting and go, wow, Josh just said that. And I just need to sit with that for a minute. And the beauty of things like this is you can rewind them.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? You run and you go, what does that mean to me? Because some things like, I'll just say like some of the really heavy stuff, Andrew Huberman podcasts, they're great. I love them. They're cognitively heavy sometimes.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, sometimes I'm like, fucking, I can't listen to this shit. It's a bit heavy. Sometimes it's a bit too much. Whereas things that I like to be able to pause and reflect on, what does that mean to me? Because otherwise it's just verbal masturbation.
Yeah, in and out.
Sometimes it's like, oh god, yeah, I'm just having this mental warm bath, and it's doesn't correlate to my life at all. Yeah. And that's what I love, and I'll attribute it to you now. Is you've given some lovely ground level, tactical, deployable, actionable ways that you and the team have made your way through that and gone about that. Because otherwise, we can paint the big banner and go, oh, utilize your mental health resources, and what the fuck does that even mean?
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
These things are very personal, and there's a wide spectrum of how that actually relates to you. You've got to find someone where they are.
Yes.
It's just like you come to the team and you're the mental health awareness person, and you're just screaming at the place of stillness and whatever that they need to arrive at. But you've got to meet them where they are. It's a bit like you said about getting in the puddle of mud with them.
Yeah.
You're just going to sit with them.
Right.
Don't arrive with all the solutions and PDFs and flip charts and, oh, look, this is your Venn diagram of, you're actually stuck in a cognitive space right now. You need to be more left brain. And people are just like, oh, right, why don't you go and suck a fucking exhaust and then, come back with your cognitive dissonance later and talk me through the 12 steps of loss.
Right.
Yeah,
and that's so much awareness for us.
I'm just trying not to kill myself now.
Right, absolutely. And that creates awareness. And I relate to a lot of what you just said with filling my space with like the self-development stuff. And then I just try to turn that around and put that out in the fire service in some way, because it's helped me and I'm learning as I'm putting stuff out there as well. And we're also, I think, really great at filling our time, probably more than we need to be, right? That has come up in so many conversations where we fill our to-do lists, and to know that it's okay.
With dopamine machines.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. To know that it's okay to take a step back and actually do some, I don't want to say self-care, at least over here, is used too much. It's been watered down.
It's got a bit romanticized and a little bit woo-woo, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And that's the problem with some of this stuff. It gets hijacked.
That's a great way to put it. Absolutely. It gets hijacked. But just even this conversation, I started taking notes too. Like, you've had some quotes and one-liners in here that I know I'm going to sit with, that I really appreciate. And that's the awesome thing about...
Most of it was not from me. I don't claim any of it myself.
No, you did. Well, you've done a great job articulating it, and I just hope that I can do the same, because like you said, like everything that I'm doing has just been in reading and taking from other places and just putting an application to make it relatable for firefighters as well.
That's what you just said there, relatable. I think that's what's beautiful. Like Daily Stoic is a great example.
Yeah.
This shit's hundreds of years old. I'm a recovering addict, and a lot of addiction is grounded in Stoicism. The Serenity Prayer and your sphere of control and all this sort of stuff. It's all Stoicism.
Yes.
A lot of it is. But if you say, this is how they dealt with it back in Athens, people are like, oh, the fuck, that's all right, it's fucking useless then. You know what I mean? Because we've got the wheel and running water now. And I'm like, yeah, but your monkey mind, not really very different. It's just really struggling now.
Yeah.
Like we're personally, I feel like we're having a really valuable conversation from thousands of miles away through the gift of technology. Fantastic. But the messages we communicate and the messages we're talking about, this is grounding itself in many generations. We're standing on the shoulders of giants and not forgetting some of those tools and their really, really practical application that we can use them today. I think that's what makes us feel so lost sometimes. We get so driven by technology and development and creativity and innovation that we forget we're just, depending on your evolutionary beliefs, we're just wobbling around, with our monkey brains. Right. What was Chimp Paradox? Professor Stephen Peters, if you've not read that book, Chimp Paradox is a great one.
Oh, no.
Look, we're struggling with this stuff. We're Chimp Paradox, Professor Steve Peters, really, really good. Some of it's a bit heavy, but and he's a bit monotone, but he's a very fascinating guy. Very, very good.
Nice.
Recognizing, and also that says about getting back to that fitness element, giving your primitive mind a safe place to manifest itself, and they talks about that chimp. You've got to have a safe space for your chimp to go and play, and that's what I want to keep Firehouses like. You know,
keep them fun.
Yeah, we're all a bunch of weird, crazy, mad as a box of frogs.
Yeah,
you've got a group of freaks, and you as the leader are there to protect those freaks. Draw some rough lines so they don't start throwing stones through windows, but don't try and sterilize them to the extent where they lose all of their authenticity. There's a great Chinese proverb that water which is too pure has no fish. You know what I mean? Yeah. Don't take all the fish out. If you sterilize something to death, you kill all the bacteria. You kill.
Right.
You and I are full of some toxic bacteria. And if it gets into the wrong part of our body, we'll die.
Right.
You know, your spleen bursts, that's game over. But if we removed all the bacteria from your body, you'd be dead.
Right. There's that.
And we'd lose all the character and all the greatness about the fire and rescue service if we tried to corporatize it, professionalize it. It echoes back to the beginning of our conversation, you know, not let people say things how they need to say them. Yeah, okay, as long as they're not racist, whatever, sexist, bullies.
Right.
You know, let's not sterilize this thing to the extent where we forget what we are.
Exactly. I mean, we're all humans. We're all messy. We all come with our own baggage, but we all come with beliefs and experiences that will change the way the things that we do. Like I'll have a guy who's got a year on, but maybe he's 35 years old and he was a history teacher. I'm going to learn something from that guy. Same thing, like the mother that was stay at home for a while and now she has entered the fire service and she's a juggernaut. Like I can guarantee you I'm going to learn something from her. And then together as a team collectively, when we do that together, it's awesome. And I think
that's what I think is the beautiful diversity of our stuff. And I think with the volleys and the on-call retained and stuff like that, they have a professional career outside of this.
Yes.
Or even if you're just doing it full time. I always say to people, your mess is your message. So like I might be a recovering addict. I've had 5 or 6 failed businesses. We had miscarriages as twins. I've had lots of injuries and blah, blah, blah. That's part of authenticity. Josh will be able to connect with people that I can't connect with and vice versa because of his own messy life.
Yes.
And the stuff that brings his authenticity. I've not been on a crew where we've had a line of duty death. I can't speak off my experience. You know, I can. The difference between sympathy and empathy, isn't it? I can try and relate to you, but I've never been there, so I'm not going to say, yeah, Josh, I know what it feels like. No, you fucking don't. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. But I can guarantee you, as we dig into this, your life experiences and the things that you've gone through, once I start to learn more about you, you are 100% going to make me a better human being because of that ability to connect and find that common ground. And I think that's where probably a lot of people are struggling right now is, I'm just kind of postulating as we go here, is validation. And what I mean is, I think a lot of the people, going back to some of our earlier conversations of shying away from training or the physical fitness, or maybe not holding a standard, is they know there's a level, a cursory amount of work that's involved. And a lot of times to truly validate yourself in this profession, you got to do a lot of hard things, and you got to do it with a group of people, and you got to do that together. And at some point, I think actually speaking of the stoicism, Ryan Holiday just posted something about a Winston Churchill quote, like, destiny may tap you on the shoulder. Are you going to be ready and prepared? So when we don't go through the steps, when we don't go through all that work, there's always that worry. And so we hide. But it takes that incredible amount of work to validate what it is that we've done. And when destiny comes knocking, are we going to be able to uphold our end of the bargain? And that's what I'm trying to also preach, is that I want to make sure that when I get that knock, my crew and I, my family, personal, professionally, whatever it is, we have the wherewithal to overcome that. And that's the Forged and Unbroken message, is to create a durable, resilient human. And it's amazing. I feel so fortunate to have this conversation because we're spitballing so many cool things. You know, we're in completely different time zones.
You know what I'm going to call this?
What's that?
So the next tattoo that I'm going to get, I've got it written on my fire gloves. I've got lots of stupid tattoos, which people laugh at.
I'm covered.
I'm covered in stupid stuff, mostly writing. Semper Paratus. I'm going to call this. I'm probably going to call it Woodscape, something like that. Semper Paratus is Latin, always ready.
Always, I like that.
Always ready. You know what I mean? Because that's it.
Yeah.
I have like these basic level things. I'm about to go swimming with my daughter, so we'll have to wrap it up soon. But like, can you swim? Can you climb over a wall? Can you run a mile?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Can you lift your own body weight over a wall? These are, if something happened right now and we had to get to the other side of town, could you run? Could you run a mile? You know, if there's an attack going on in the alleyway, can you get over that wall?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? All of those things, healthy selfishness, you can't pour from an empty cup. Yeah. You've got to be ready, always. Always ready. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? That is something that is difficult, especially when we look at promotion processes and stuff like that. I'm going to stop myself before I go down the rabbit hole, but someone gave me a great example of a lot of interviews now we have these days where nothing's being authenticated, nothing's being tested. People are just sat there bullshitting each other sometimes. And it's like some interviews is two people sat on opposite sides of the table, both hoping they don't get found out.
Yeah. Imposter syndrome.
Like, fuck me.
Imposter syndrome is real.
It's so difficult. Right. I know I want to be respectful of our time. We've loads of shit we didn't talk about, mate. I really love this conversation. I would genuinely know bullshit, and I don't say this to everybody because I don't have to, and it's not whatever. I'd love to have you back. I'd love to have another conversation.
No, please. And
either my platform, your platform, I'm happy to do whatever suits you and is most appropriate of whatever elements we want to cover. But I'm also going to practice what I preach and not tell my daughter that I'll run out of time because I know. What time are you at there?
It is, what time is it? It's almost 3:00 in the afternoon here, so my girls are getting off the school bus here in about an hour from now. Yeah,
we're 8:45. Sorry, no, we're 7:45. We're 8:45 in the evening, so we're going to do a late swim. We were going to do a late swim anyway,
nice.
Because we couldn't get in after the clubs, but we're going to go and swim.
Yeah.
So I'm going to practice what I preach. Please send my love to your daughters. Please send my love to the team. Please send my love to the station, the department. We've got a whole bunch of links we're going to drop in below this, folks. I apologize for wrapping us up tight, but maybe that's a little bit of a lead in for the next one because we've got elements on leadership that we didn't go into. I know there's, again, you can't teach any of these things in isolation, like we said before. There's actually interconnecting links, and the web of conversation that we've laid before the feet of people today has been so rich. And I thank you so much for your honesty, mate, your authenticity. It's been a real gift.
Pete, I can't thank you enough, man. This has been some of the most fun I've had talking to somebody, and especially like we were strangers 2 hours ago to some degree.
I love this
and
shit.
This is so amazing.
Mate, I've done a couple of podcasts with people where I eventually meet them like years down the line, and I feel like I know them so well and we've never met.
Well, we do. My wife
crazy.
does a lot of traveling internationally, and we get over to the UK a fair amount. So I'm going to have to look you up, and
Mate, I would love
that would be
to.
amazing.
Love to.
That'd be amazing. This absolute honor to have me on, Pete. I really appreciate it. And I would love to have you on as well. I have so many more questions than answers right now, in all the best ways.
I'm sure I will disappoint you emphatically when we have our next conversation.
Oh, no, dude, this has been fantastic. I've learned so much. I
think it's great.
You.
Like two podcasters, it's like verbal jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Because you're all bending each other like, tell me about this, brother.
Yeah.
You know, reflect back on that. And it's like, you know, keep flipping to opposition.
All right, my mind's on fire in all the best ways, and I love it.
You are a treadmill friend. You know, I always say you've got treadmill friends and sofa friends. You have a conversation with someone, you either want to lie down on a sofa and go sleep, or you want to go and fucking run on a treadmill.
Yeah.
I'm going to go and smash the shit out of swimming. My daughter ain't got no chance because I'm just going to be like, fucking, oh shit, and he said that, and we haven't even got into so much of the fitness and dynamics and longevity and the leadership stuff. But anyway, next
go
conversation.
hang out with family, man. I love it.
Send my love, brother.
Please.
I love you
Thank
lots, and I will speak to you soon. All right,
Take care, brother.
Take it easy. The Firefighters Podcast was created to recognize, acknowledge, inspire, and hopefully even motivate these incredible individuals who have chosen to be part of the first responder community. Our driving purpose is to create a legacy resource for the current and future generations of firefighters and first responders. We get some incredible feedback from listeners and guests, and as the podcast grows, our desire to create longevity and sustainability means that we are asking for the support of our listeners. If you want to support the podcast, if you want to get discounts to our merchandise, hoodies, clothing, coins, patches, tallies, and also access to all of the incredible documents get shared with us from our podcast guests and sector leaders, then please head over to our Patreon page, and for just £3 a month, you can support the future of the podcast. Please finally hit that follow, subscribe, or rate button on the platform you're listening, and wherever you're in the world, please support your emergency services responders, and thank you for listening.